All right, let's get it. Drive time Wednesday afternoon, 7 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. Beautiful day. Lovely day. We've had such a great week of weather. It's about 70 degrees flat and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. Not too warm at all, not too cold. Feels more like spring, even though it's June time now. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic, Porter Larson behind the glass. Happy Wednesday to you. You are halfway through your work week. You're one day closer to the weekend. And we got a lot to do. We got a busy show. We got a good guest list with a bunch of different topics. The NBA Finals get rolling tomorrow on ABC, 6:30 Mountain Time. And, of course, you can hear it on our radio station. The Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder will do battle. Tonight is game one of the Stanley Cup Finals. The battle for Lord Stanley's Cup gets rolling tonight between Edmonton and Florida. A rematch of the Stanley Cup Finals a year ago. It is such a grueling tournament that you just don't see very many Stanley Cup rematches. But we have it starting tonight. A 7-game Stanley Cup Finals last year saw Florida win the first 3 games. Edmonton roll back to win 3 straight. And then Florida be able to grab that game 7. So we'll see if we get another unbelievable Stanley Cup final starting tonight, hopefully. We get 7 games. I don't think we're getting 7 games on the basketball side of things. We'll talk about it today as the Pacers are just up against a juggernaut. Shea, reigning MVP, has elevated his game to the points where he can kind of dictate things in a way that really nobody on Indiana can, even though Tyrese Halliburton is an excellent, excellent lead guard. So some interesting storylines and topics surrounding the NBA Finals we'll get to today. The world of the professional golf, as far as the PGA Tour goes, the RBC Canadian Open is this weekend, and then high-speed head to the U.S. Open, where Phil Mickelson will try to complete his Grand Slam, potentially for the final time. Phil has a 5-year exemption after he won the tournament 5 years ago, became the oldest winner of the tournament. And so this will be his last chance to win that Grand Slam. It's the only major championship Phil Mickelson does not have. Rory McIlroy continues to be grumpy despite his incredible year. So a little golf, of course, top of mind this time of year as the summer is upon us. RSL with an interesting June. They only have 2 games. They're off until June the 14th. The LA Galaxy game will be moved. I believe that's because of Leagues Cup stuff. It's only 2 games for RSL this month. Not a lot of opportunities for Real Salt Lake to get points that they badly, badly need. The summer window opens next month, and that's the next opportunity for RSL to add some talent to this roster. Off-season college football conversation continues to be pretty interesting. Ryan Day, of course, comes out today and says the Big Ten deserves 4 automatic spots in the CFP. Color me shocked. I still think we're moving ahead to the 5+11 model. University of Utah continues to piece together their 2026 recruiting class. Doesn't look like Andre Miller is on his way to join Alex Jensen's staff. Speaking of former Utes who are coaches, what's next for Johnny Bryant? The Phoenix Suns decided on Jared Ott today. Jared Ott, an assistant coach for Kenny Atkinson, coaching alongside Johnny Bryant last year. Takes over the Phoenix Suns after they moved on from Mike Budenholzer. Devin Booker has now had 7 coaches in his career with the Phoenix Suns. It's pretty wild. Of course, the latest with the Knicks firing Tom Thibodeau after the best run in franchise, well, not in franchise history. They actually have won championships. Just very few of us were alive when that happened. So what's next in New York? Is that a stop for Johnny Bryant? We'll get into it. A lot of, and this is kind of how these things go. When a coach gets fired or a player gets traded, it's like a relationship with friends of yours, right? Like, you don't really know what actually happened until the breakup, and then everybody wants to dish and spill. So now that Tom Thibodeau has been fired, there are rumors that this was player-driven. Mikal Bridges apparently doesn't like playing a lot of minutes. I hate it when players bitch and moan about playing, man. It's so exhausting. And Karl Anthony Towns apparently does not want to play for Tom Thibodeau anymore either. This is such a players-driven league. And, of course, the Utah Jazz are in a scenario where their coaching staff and front office appears to be solidified and solid, but the problem is they do not have good basketball players. So we'll get into it on the show today. A lot of different topics going on the program. Our first guest will be Josh Furlong. Josh covers the University of Utah for our friends at KSL. We'll do some Utah football and some Utah basketball with Josh right out of the gates. Neil Smith stops by on this Wednesday afternoon to preview the Stanley Cup Finals, which begins tonight. And, of course, we're high speed ahead to the NHL draft. Neil was one of the best pro hockey roster constructors in the 90s, so we'll get his take on some Utah Mammoth offseason and get a preview of the Stanley Cup Finals tonight. Andy Larson stops by a little bit later on as well. We'll look forward to catching up with Andy about the Utah Jazz, the Austin Ainge news, some NBA draft stuff, and maybe a little RSL with Andy if time allows. But, again, only 2 matches for RSL this month, and not a lot of momentum, at least in the positive direction. And then we'll go from there. We got some other guests that are a little bit fluid on the show today. We'll kind of keep you in the loop, but it is a Wednesday edition of the radio show, and we appreciate you making us a part of your day. Josh Furlong, Neil Smith, Andy Larson, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson. We have 2 Larsons, Andy and Porter, on the show today.
Yo.
Porter, hello. Happy Wednesday. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I always go through this weird playoff withdrawal where for weeks and weeks and weeks we have, well, first we have multiple games every night. And then we move over to the conference finals, which is every other night. So at least we have a game every other night. And, yeah, for the past – I'm all caught up on our Friends and Neighbors, Apple TV, John Hamm. Great television show. I've basically just been binging television shows waiting for the finals to start.
Yeah, I've just been, like, outside wandering around aimlessly, which is, fine with me, to be perfectly clear. When the break kind of starts and you realize that the sports are slowing down, especially if you're like us, you're a little, probably football, basketball centric, some soccer, hockey. We'll throw our guys in there. But, yeah, man, it really starts to seep in when you have several days off in between games, when going back months now, if you're a college hoops watcher, you had games every night. You had multiple games going on at the same time. You basically were overdosing on basketball for 2 months, and then you have this come down, to use that analogy. I will say, Spence, also, it is technically still spring.
Yeah, but it's June, and it feels like April. I'm here for it. I'm here. Last weekend, I was playing golf, and it was 92 degrees.
It was much. It was a bit much. But, yeah, the solstice is, I think, the 20th.
Okay, Marianne Williamson, nobody's impressed with your knowledge of the stars. We've been over this.
Oh, no, I know. I'm just keeping you in the loop. Did you see the Northern Lights this weekend?
Is Mercury in retrograde yet?
Really pretty.
Is it in retrograde yet?
I don't know about that one.
Okay, because if it is, white women are about to make a bunch of different decisions that will badly affect their relationship.
I have seen, to get way down this rabbit hole.
Okay, how deep are we going here? We've got stuff to do.
There's certain guys that think the tilt of the earth is about to shift and change everything. You got bad.
You got to stop listening to Joe Rogan podcast, bro.
No, it's entertaining. Just to be clear.
Okay.
Not informational.
All right. Yeah. Joe Rogan somehow 5 years ago his job was to convince humans to eat animal feces on television, and now he's where people go to get legitimate medical and science information.
Also, where'd Fear Factor go? Just because Joe Rogan's not doing it doesn't mean we can't make people do that on television anymore.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
You could do it.
Okay. All right. I'll host Fear Factor.
That's what I'm saying.
And then in 5 years, maybe I'll have a podcast where I give people horrible medical advice.
What's your podcast? Reality Check. Yeah, there you go.
May it rest in peace.
We could bring it back.
We could bring it back. And I'll have irresponsible people on my podcast to spread misinformation and conspiracy theories.
You should bring me on for 5 hours.
I should. Well, apparently that's how people are making their way through the world now. It doesn't matter what you say. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant as long as people are engaged. The problem is then they listen, then they spread the information to their friends, and suddenly nobody knows which way is up and which way is down.
Yeah, if you're interested, I'm here.
Okay, I appreciate it. But in the meantime, you can participate in the show that we do every day. Want to remind you guys that Live Night Events presents the 2025 Granary Live Concert Series. Powered by Nightingale College and Murdoch Hyundai, Utah's #1 Hyundai dealer. Experience outdoor concerts in the heart of downtown Salt Lake's Granary District. You can find more details on ESPN700sports.com. Josh Furlong, our first guest right out of the gates. But before we get to Josh, courtesy of our friends at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash with millions of members. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Do you know ball? There's only one series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use that promo code ESPN700. They're going to hook you up with $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. Don't even have to win the $5 lineup. They're just going to hook you up with $50. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. They're going to hook you up with $50 on the house. Prize Picks, you can run your game all season long. All right, so friend of the program, co-creator of the program, original producer of the program, JP, John Paul Chunga, our guy who joins the show from time to time, had a chance to sit down with Austin Ainge after Austin's press conference that we played on the show and has made the rounds with local media, both TV and radio. I would encourage you, and of course we support our guy, JP, who's now over with the Utah Jazz, and voice of the Stars and voice of the Royals, very busy young man. I would encourage you to go listen to JP's latest episode of Roundball Roundup, sitting down with Austin Ainge, who by all accounts is now the lead decision maker and loudest voice in the Utah Jazz front office. So, of course, the soundbite that has made the rounds not just locally but nationally, a lot of our NBA guys actually that are on the show, Dave McMenamin sent Porter and I a text with that soundbite. He's like, oh, interesting. Like, it resonated with a lot of people. So our very own Sean O'Connell, as you guys know by now, asked Austin the question about his philosophy on manipulating minutes and tanking. And Austin simply said it was a great soundbite. You will not see that this year. Well, he went on JP's pod and elaborated essentially on what he meant. And instead of trying to accurately represent those comments, I'll encourage you to go to the Utah Jazz podcast page and find JP's interview with Austin Ainge. Essentially, the gist of it was, yes, I mean, what he said continues to be true. But basically what you won't see this year, if Austin is being forthcoming and forthright with his comments, and if, by the way, if he is the loudest voice in the front office, if Justin Zanuck and his father, Danny, and Will Hardy and everybody else, if they're reporting to Austin, okay, if Austin is calling the shots, and if we take Ryan Smith at his words, he very much is, then the edict to how this will transpire will come from Austin himself. And if that's a direct line between Austin and Will Hardy, who worked together in Boston when Austin was there and Will was Ime Udoka's lead assistant coach, if it's a direct line from Austin to Will, and Will has to essentially follow marching orders from Austin Ainge, what we won't see this year are the lengthy injury reports that we all see on social media every single time the Jazz play a game. What we won't see this year is a healthy Walker Kessler sitting on the sidelines. What we won't see this year is a healthy Lauri Markkanen sitting on the sidelines, or an invented injury for Colin Sexton or John Collins or Jordan Clarkson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, and so as we've discussed and will continue to discuss throughout the course of what is shaping up to be a very fascinating offseason in pro basketball, what does that look like? What does it look like for the Utah Jazz as they're presently constituted? Now, side note, I do not believe the way they're presently constituted will be the way that they are constituted come fall, but only time will tell. Because there is part of me that does believe some of the veteran players you have on the roster are actually perfect fits for a team that should not be serious about winning this year. Should not be serious about putting their best foot forward as far as trying to win games. Now, you can be serious about competing, and you can actually approach the thing with integrity in a way that they didn't last year and still lose a lot of basketball games, certainly with the current landscape of the Western Conference, where, you know, it's interesting. The walking line is 13 teams in the West next year believe that they're at least playoff or play-in teams. I don't know how many believe they're top four for like home court advantage. But when you look at the way the Blazers kind of evolved this year, like Portland did a really good job of actual player development this year, not fake player development like the Jazz did not lean into player development this year. They're going to tell you they did, but they didn't. Because they were unserious about competing. They were unserious about winning. They did not approach this thing with integrity as it pertains to the way you should treat the game and the sport and this league, where you're lucky to be a part of it. And part of being a professional is showing up and doing your job to the best of your ability every single day. And yes, sometimes when you're a little bit injured, I still, I still will die on this hill that way too many NBA players don't play basketball, even when they're healthy enough to do it. I don't love the load management. I never will. And by the way, there's no data that indicates it works. Did you watch the playoffs this year? It was it was a bloodbath of injuries for some of the best players in the game, and some of the best players in the game that actually do take time off were hurt in the postseason. That allowed the pathway forward for certain teams to continue to play on, namely the Indiana Pacers, who ran into a Cleveland Cavalier team whose health was compromised. The Golden State Warriors lost Stephen Curry. Obviously, the Blazers had a compromised Dame Lillard. The Boston Celtics lost Jason Tatum. There's no data, and Tatum plays, by the way. I should be clear. Tatum is not one of these guys that wants to sit. There's no data that indicates sitting players actually helps them stay healthy throughout the course of the year. This is a initiative that has always been driven by powerful agents behind the scenes that want their young clients to get to their second contract as fully healthy as possible so they can make a bunch of money. That's what load management is not about. Teams and players and the league trying to protect the health of these guys for the sanctity of anything. It's money driven, like everything else in this league right now. It's why so many great coaches continue to lose jobs, because this is a player driven league. Has been for a while. And LeBron is kind of the guy that started this player empowerment movement, which is why a lot of people are anti-LeBron, right? And I understand that, because it has jumped the shark a little bit when great head coaches like Michael Malone, who won a championship just 2 years ago, and Tom Thibodeau, who took the Knicks to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 30 years and won back-to-back 50-win seasons for the first time since the mid-'90s. Taylor Jenkins, excellent young coach that did a great job in Memphis. These guys lose their jobs. Mike Budenholzer is a champ and an NBA Coach of the Year multiple times, out of a job. And it's because the league is player-driven. And the players deserve their compensation, their share of the basketball-related income and the revenue that comes their way, because they're the product. But it really has kind of gone overboard just a little bit as it pertains to how much power they have. But ultimately, back to the point before we catch a break, it is going to be fascinating to see what this offseason looks like for the Jazz, because if we take Austin at his word, and he says they will be serious about competing. Again, the Western Conference is deep enough and talented enough and good enough that the Jazz could put their best foot forward and still only win 18 to 20 games. And I'm here to tell you that's okay, because to me, the number one priority for a team that is this young, and for a team that, if we're honest, is this bad and this far behind everybody else in their peer group, that first-round pick next year is something you cannot convey to Oklahoma City. You have to keep it in your back pocket. And then finally, there's this. Starting in just a few weeks for the NBA draft, this front office, okay, if we're expected to believe that Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge and Austin Ainge and the talent evaluators over there are good at their job, they need to start hitting on their draft picks in a way that they haven't so far. This is the fourth year since the Mitchell Gobert, Quinn Snyder, Dennis Lindsey teardown. And there's some things to like about Kyle Filipowski. There's some things to kind of like about Isaiah Collier. There's really not a lot to like about Cody Williams right now, and we need to see Taylor Hendricks healthy, and I am not a huge Keontae George guy. The draft picks they've made so far have been mixed at best, and if we're honest, they have not hit on them. They've got a top 5 pick. You got to hit on that pick, or you got to utilize it to make some sort of maneuver to add a legitimately talented player to the roster that can play right away, that can step in and play right away. Because I do think we will see player movement with some of the veteran pieces now that Collins and Sexton and Clarkson are on expiring deals. John Collins, too. They will be easier to move than they have been over the past couple of years. And there is part of me that believes we are going to simply see what Washington did last year. Washington actually tried to win games. They just played all young players, like all young players. They had very few veteran players even on the roster and almost zero veteran players in the rotation. So when Austin Ainge says we will be serious about competing. And we all understand that, yes, okay, that's great. But on the back end of next season, you still have to maintain your draft capital. It probably means both on the roster and in Will's rotation is maybe entirely comprised of the young players they have now and 2 or potentially 4 young players they're going to add coming up on June the 25th. And if you just have a group of young players that are unproven, you can approach this thing with some integrity, and you can actually be serious about competing and still lose enough games to hold on to your draft pick, which has to be the name of the game this year for the Utah Jazz. All right, we'll switch gears coming up on the other side. We're going to bring in Josh Furlong, covers the University of Utah for our friends at KSL. Have Neil Smith stopping by to preview tonight's Game 1 and the series as far as the battle for Lord Stanley's Cup go. And then Andy Larson will stop by for some more Jazz and some RSL. Jam-packed, busy Wednesday show. And it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Going to preview tonight's Stanley Cup final game one. Edmonton taking on Florida. It is a rematch, which we do not see very often. It's such a grueling tournament. So Neil Smith, former general manager of the Rangers and the Islanders, high-level scout for the Detroit Red Wings, a Stanley Cup champion himself, will stop by. Going to bring in Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune. And how about Eric Weddle will join the program? Potential Hall of Famer. Our guy Eric Weddle is going to stop by, but on a Wednesday, starting things out, Josh Furlong covers the Utes for KSL. Josh, happy Wednesday, man. How we doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Spence?
I'm good, man. I'm good. So since we're going to have EWED on, your reaction to the College Football Hall of Fame news, I think that dropped about a week ago or so, yeah?
Yeah. Well, no, it was actually, I think, Monday.
Monday, okay. Monday. Gotcha. So what do you think?
I mean, I think this is a no-brainer. Quite honestly, I'm part of that committee that helps select some of these guys, and he was a no-brainer to me as I was looking at some of these individuals who are the greats of college football. And there's no question that the Alex Smith, the Eric Weddles are the greats of Utah football. I was not in the state during the time that Eric Weddle played, so I wasn't familiar with his college game. But just watching kind of the ambassador that he is to the program, as well as kind of what he did in the NFL, like this is a guy that truly cares about football being played the right way, plays it physical, but also more just trying to help people grow. So I think there's no better person to be kind of a candidate for that, knowing kind of who he is on and off the field that really kind of specifies like the types of people that the Hall of Fame wants to represent and bring forward. So I think it's a great opportunity for him.
I didn't know that you were part of that committee. That's really cool. Illuminate us on the process. Like, how did these things kind of work, and ultimately, how did it end with Eric Weddle on the ballot?
So I'm only a part of it. So what happens is they have different regions, and you have to select a certain number of players from each region that get brought up to the larger committee, which I'm not a part of. But you basically rank the number of players that you think should be presented to that larger committee from your region. This is dating back to guys, well before I was even born. But it's looking at a bunch of these guys that, have had great careers. They look at their on the field, how they did, what they did at the NFL, if that's what they were able to do, as well as kind of what they do nowadays and kind of like the service that they provide and other stuff like that. So it's kind of cool to kind of put these names that you've seen forever and compare them to one another. I mean, for example, like Eric Bieniemy, obviously a great coach out there. He's involved in that kind of situations and being presented as somebody. So you get a wide range of college football players and trying to see, if it's their time to be in the Hall of Fame. And, some of them are on this list for quite a while. Others are on there for a shorter time. And I think Eric's going to be on there for a shorter time, quite honestly.
All right. Well, good for our guy. It'll be fun to catch up with him today. All right, let's do some off-season college football storylines. Since you and I last spoke, certain things have kind of come down. The straight seeding, so we'll start with what's in front of us, and then we'll get to the expanded 16-team CFP, but that's not until next year. The straight seeding seemed to be one of those things that was such common sense that I have no clue why they didn't do it to begin with. So now we do have straight seeding coming up for the 12-team expanded CFP coming up just simply this year. Do you agree with this endeavor, and do you think it's probably something they should have done right out the gates?
Yeah, I honestly don't know why they wanted to do it the other way. I mean, I get it from the standpoint that they're trying to do whatever they can to eliminate the selection committee really having full control over it. But I think you look at a lot of people seeing Boise State and Arizona State being a 3 and 4 seed and not being that highly ranked compared to some of the other peers, what it could do to Oregon, that kind of stuff. I mean, I think there's just a lot of unintended consequences as part of it. And just a straight seeding seems to be the easiest. This is the thing that everybody's familiar with, whether you're playing, Little League baseball all the way up to, football, whatever it may be. That's how tournaments are. One plays 16 or whatever it may be, and you're used to that. So I think this seems like the easiest way, but college football obviously has to try to overcomplicate things and make things a little bit more complex and entertaining. So we'll see. I think this will be a better system.
So now we move over to what's on the table for 2026, which is an expanded 16-team CFP. And it depends on who you talk to. I think, most people out this way with the Big 12 footprint will say the 11+5 or whatever model is the way to go. I also think it's probably difficult to deny that the SEC and the Big Ten, Josh, in any negotiation, it's pretty simple. Whoever has the leverage is going to come out on top. And I think it would be a fool's errand to pretend the SEC and the Big Ten don't have some leverage. I don't know how much, but probably enough to push this 4 AQ for each conference thing through. Of course, Ryan Day comes out with his comments today. When the dust settles, two-part question, what do you think the 16-team model will look like, and what do you want it, Josh, to look like?
Ooh, those are two really interesting questions. I've gone back and forth on this 5+11 versus the 4-4-2-2-1 plan. I can see benefits and consequences of each. Honestly, though, I think there's some undercurrent of all of this, right? Where I think it's more political play, where you have the ACC and the Big 12 saying, "Hey, we want to earn it on the field," which kind of is a nod to the Big Ten and the SEC, kind of saying, "Hey, look, we're going to give you that, and we may take less because of it, but we don't want to give you all of the power, getting 4 automatic bids." But then on the other hand, you're giving up 2 straight guarantees that you're going to get, plus a potential maybe third if you manage to get in that high. I think this is a really tricky situation. I think it's probably going to land somewhere closer to the 5 versus 11, guarantee the top 5 conferences a spot, and then straight seed from there. I just, I don't know. This is hard. I feel like we're overcomplicating it for something that doesn't need to be that way. If you want to say it's 16 teams, just the best 16 teams are in there. If you're really that worried about a selection committee that you've put together, that's the bigger problem. But the reality is they all complain about the selection committee when these are former coaches and these are former administrators. These are people that understand this at a high level. This isn't just like you and I going out there and trying to select the 16 best teams. These are people with well-intentioned, reasons behind all this stuff. And we're doing everything we can to kind of avoid the selection committee. And we're going to try to give certain conferences a number. Just the 16 best teams need to go in there. To me, that would be the best approach. I think that's what it is. You see disparity between 1 versus 16. Can a 16 seed, make a run or upset? Sure. Any given day something can happen. But I think it gets really tricky trying to maneuver and finagle certain things to try to get a certain number of teams in there. And I just don't love that approach, even if it is a guarantee. Just straight seed it, go from there.
So it's been a really wild news cycle over the past couple of months as we all were awaiting the House v. NCAA settlement to simply provide guidelines and guardrails. And we kind of all thought that would be across the line. And there have been a tremendous amount of things that have stopped the progress, a lot of red tape, roster number restrictions. And then what nobody saw coming, I certainly didn't. I don't think anybody the Ross Dellingers of the world didn't seem to see this coming. Are a couple of states, including Tennessee and others, actually passing legislation telling their member institutions that reside in their state, hey, just so you know, you don't have to adhere to what the NCAA House settlement actually tells you to do with NIL funds and distributions. So good news, if you're in our state, you do not have to adhere to the guidelines that you will receive from this settlement. And then the P4 conferences draft contracts and disseminate those contracts to all their member institutions saying, hey, regardless of what your state law says, if you want to be in one of our conferences, you do have to adhere to what the House v. NCAA settlement says about NIL distributions and such. And, Josh, at this point, I just wonder if it's time for all of us that love this sport, cover this sport, and consume this sport, just to say, this is the new normal. And it's just going to be a scenario where every offseason, essentially the only people that are enjoying it are the attorneys because they're going to make the money. And I don't know if we're still high speed ahead to this pro football model hybrid AFC, NFC, 2-conference college football reality anymore. I just think we're kind of in this space and will be in this space for quite some time where it's just kind of continued chaos and lawsuits and filings and state legislation. And I don't really see an end game. I've just kind of accepted that from the standpoint of people that do the job that you and I do, we're just in for these lawsuits to be filed, and then ultimately, you have these lawyers over here deciding they want to look at this, and then they're going to push back on that. And I just think we're kind of in for reshuffling deck chairs in the Titanic in college football for the foreseeable future. I don't know that I really see an end game anymore based off the chaos we've seen this offseason.
No, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think that's the frustration about a sport that everybody loves because it seemed more pure, right? It seemed like you had your allegiances based on, whether it be your family has always been, this fan, or you went to that school. There was a lot of pride that went into that, more than just a professional team, right? Like there's different types of pride for that. And now that's really chipping away at the core of what college sports is. And I think that's, you're getting more of the hardcore fans, the ones that are paying attention to it every single day. They're the ones getting riled up, especially because they're the ones that understand the nuances. They're the ones that don't tune in suddenly in August and wonder, okay, what's happening? Who's on the roster? These are the people that are looking every single day. These are the ones that are paying attention. These are the ones generally probably maybe the boosters, the ones that are putting in the money. When you start disenfranchising that group, I think you lose the effect of what college sports can be, especially in college football. We all understand that it has shifted away, especially from an amateur model. It was always a masked amateur model. There was always a lot of different things that the NCAA screwed up. But now we're sitting in a quasi-professional realm where there's no straight understanding of how it's supposed to be. There's no collective bargaining agreement. There's, like you said, state laws that are trumping the NCAA, which really doesn't have any legal power anyway. And it's just this big cluster that doesn't really make sense for anything. And I think that, I don't know what the end game in here is, right? Like, unless there's some sort of binding contracts, which will still get challenged in court, but unless there's some sort of binding contracts or certain things that kind of pull everyone together, this is going to continue to be the cycle every single year. And it's frustrating because most people, they just want to tune into the games. They want to show up on a Saturday, kind of relax from all the stresses of the regular work week and just enjoy their team. And now it's becoming much more professionalized, much more complicated, and it just doesn't feel like the sport that we used to know. I mean, it's still fun. Don't get me wrong. Ratings are still high. Everybody's still excited to watch it. And come August, September, we're all going to forget what's happening in the summer. But there's still that in the background that frustrates people, that makes them not want to, donate to the programs or invest in them the same way. Because one, you don't know if the players are going to be there. You don't know what it's going to look like. Your team may be relegated suddenly and you have no clue. And so it's just kind of this complicated system, and nobody really has any standing to be able to make it work.
One follow-up here, because you're plugged into this stuff in a way that I probably am not, because we've been pretty basketball and hockey-centric with the Stanley Cup and NBA Finals, draft coming up. But in 27 days, D1 athletic departments are scheduled to begin paying out more than $1 billion to athletes. And as of now, without House v. NCAA being settled, there are no rules. There's no enforcement because the NCAA has been told, oh, hey, by the way, you can't enforce anything. So there's conference by conference enforcement and very little regulation. And we're all waiting for this settlement to take place. And they have 27 days before the more than $1 billion is set to be distributed to these young people that play sports at schools. Are you hearing anything about a finish line in sight? I can't believe it's June 4th and we're still talking about this thing not being done.
Yeah, I mean, everything has to be settled by July 5th if there is a settlement. Obviously, Claudia Wilkins could extend it beyond that, but July 1st was the date that everybody has given that everything has to be in. July 1st is the date that schools have to say, hey, are you in the settlement or not? And if you opt out, you don't have to pay athletes. There's a lot of other rules, but you're not tied to it. But most of these schools, especially at the Power 4 level, have prepared for the last year plus to opt in. They're ready. Most of them, at the very least, are throwing 1 year's worth of cash into this program to see how it works, to try to make sure that they can pay players, remain competitive in this landscape that nobody really understands, and then kind of go from there. And so I think whether the settlement passes or not, I really think most schools are probably going to be moving forward that way, because to that point, the NCAA has nothing to do with it, right? Like, they can't say no, because how are you going to stop them, right? And at the end of the day, the NCAA is there to do the bidding of the NCAA or the college presidents and kind of put it all together. But when there's no framework and nothing there, it's going to be chaos. So I don't know that there's going to be a ton of change. I think the real problem, though, comes with roster limits and scholarships, because there's always been this other end where, okay, you can offer walk-ons and you can still have your scholarships. Well, now everybody essentially is a scholarship player proportionately, and you have to be able to have a certain roster limit. You have to have certain things. That's not going to be equal if the settlement doesn't pass. So there's so much to go into this, and obviously I don't want to get into the weeds of it, but I think there's going to be mass chaos. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to be, to me, as I'm saying this, it reminds me of, like, if you remember, like when Y2K was coming and everybody's like, and your milk is going to explode and everything. Like, I feel like we're kind of getting to that level where, no, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. But I think it's kind of getting to that mass hysteria to certain level. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. And so you kind of start going down the worst case scenario situation.
All right, Josh, let's move off of it and talk about some storylines surrounding Utah football. And, of course, the storyline that everybody loves every year is the schedule release when we actually get kick times. Let's start with the opener. It's at UCLA. It's 9 p.m. Mountain Time on Fox. Look, I'm single. I'm chilling. I've got one son. He's 24. He lives in New York. So it doesn't really affect somebody like me, but I can't imagine very many people out there with kids or deadlines or actual lives, in a way that I don't, are thrilled about a 9 p.m. kickoff for the opener. Let's start there. What are your thoughts, Utah, UCLA, 9 p.m.?
Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, especially for a game that a lot of people thought could have at least a little bit more national relevance just with Nico Iamaleava. But I think, look, that first day of college football, people are so excited to have it back that I think you're still going to get a lot of people tune into this game. It's going to be on network TV, and so it's going to be something that people can find readily. Maybe you've heard about this Tennessee quarterback that went to UCLA and you want to check it out. So, I still think you're going to get the diehards. The hard part here is, I mean, like, even here in Utah, that's a 9 o'clock game, right? I mean, that's really hard for a lot of people to stay up for. Some of these people are going to church in the morning. Some of these people, have different things on Sunday that they do. That becomes a really difficult thing. And so it's not the best. But at the end of the day, it's college football, and we're going to watch it whenever it is. I mean, if the game was at 2 a.m., I guarantee you people would tune in and watch it. So I don't get too caught up in it. I do like earlier games, and I think for a team like Utah, they want to be more on the national spotlight, but the last 2 years haven't afforded them that. And so I think you get the break where you are on Fox, you get that national line, but you're not going to get it in the exact prime time that you were thinking of. So it still works. It's still something that people are going to be excited for. A lot of fans are going to go out to the Rose Bowl and check this game out and have fun. So it'll still be a good time.
Home opener, Cal Poly, 4 o'clock. That feels like a really, really solid time. Then at Wyoming, 6 o'clock, CBS Sports Network. But I'll ask you about the final game of the regular season, at least. And will you be spending Thanksgiving in Kansas, as it's the day after Thanksgiving, and it is a 10 a.m. kick, which is aggressively early? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the 10 a.m. one, that one I'm more frustrated with, because nobody likes that game. I mean, it's nice in the sense that it's early, and it's one of those things that people can wake up after Thanksgiving and enjoy. But covering games like that, it's tough. Last year I had to travel on Thanksgiving, missed spending time with my family to go out to UCF to be able to have the Black Friday game, and that was a little later in the night. But you have to take when the flights are given. This one's tough. I mean, I'm going to be once again on a plane on Thanksgiving, ready for a 10 a.m. game. For me, I don't love it just because of the travel, but I'm not going to have anybody worry about me. That's not my issue. I just think 10 a.m. games are just a real tough thing, right? Like, I think you don't want to have that. At the end of the day, if this is on ABC, I think fans will be happy. If not, it's on ESPN, which is still good. But I think, if you can get that ABC, Utah's doing well, suddenly that becomes a great showing for your program. And maybe you're in a position to be able to be in the Big 12 championship. I don't know. We'll see how this team goes. But there's potential there where it could be good. You're going to have a lot of eyeballs on you. But at the same time, that's usually the rivalry weekend, and a lot of other teams are going to be paying attention to that week more than Utah, Kansas.
Tell our listeners, Josh, you guys have been covering this, and I obviously read the stuff you write about, anything pertaining to the Utes. The 2026 visits and the 2026 recruiting class, Obviously, that's not top of mind right now. We have a season prior to, but how that's kind of the main point of emphasis for this program currently and this coaching staff currently. Any insight on how these visits went and any names you want to throw out there of commits that our listeners should know about?
Yeah, so Utah has two commits right now, Preston Pitts and LaGarry Mitchell. Two good guys that I think are more the underrated guys that Utah tries to go for and hope that they can be stars. But, starting last weekend, there's a large group, I think it was 12 players that came in for an official visit. This begins a 1-month period where there's going to be something like 45 or more athletes coming through Utah on official visits where they wine and dine them, really try to show how it is. One of the prospective recruits, he showed video of the Utah offensive line really working through plays with him so that they could kind of get a vibe with it. So this is really Utah trying to showcase themselves to all of these kids that have a lot of talent, that have a lot of buyers, that are going to be visiting a lot of other places. The biggest name there, at least locally, is Celeste Moa. This is an athlete who can play both sides of the ball. I mean, he is probably the closest that we've seen in a while to probably like a Travis Hunter style, where he can play wide receiver. He can be on the other side as a DB. Really talented kid, number one kid in the state of Utah. And so there's a lot of emphasis to try to get him to Utah. The other kid that I'll mention is Kelvin Obot. This is the number one recruit out of Idaho. With Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu potentially moving on to the NFL this next year as potential first-round picks, this becomes a great opportunity to get a new offensive tackle, and Utah's shown that they're willing to put freshmen in there, just like they did with Spencer Fano. So that's the big selling point for those. And if you can get those two guys alone, I think that really improves your chances on what this recruiting class can be. So this next month is going to be really busy for Utah. There's going to be a lot of kids coming in and out of the state of Utah to try to kind of see what they're all about, and you're going to start seeing a lot more commits here coming soon.
Since you and I last spoke, Bill Conley released his post-spring SP Plus for ESPN.com. And I like Bill, and this model seems to make a lot of sense to me. And, of course, a post-spring SP Plus ranking certainly will not tell the entire story of what we could see come fall. And we still have a number of months until we actually see these teams play. But when you look at the post-spring SP Plus ranking, the highest-rated Big 12 team is K-State at 18. And then it goes like this. Arizona State is 22. Texas Tech is 26. BYU is 27. And we'll see what the Retzlaff stuff, as far as how that plays out. Then it is TCU 29 and Utah 31. And Utah's right ahead of Iowa State, who's at 32. So that puts Utah at 5 in the Big 12 on Bill Conley's SP+. Vegas over-under is 7.5, and that also puts Utah about 5, 6, 7. It seems like most everything I read for Big 12 predictions and previews has Utah kind of middle of the pack as opposed to at the top of the pack this year. Does that jive with your understanding?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, Bill Conley does a great job of being able to put those things together. He fine-tunes his data to really make sure that it fits with the current ages of the transfer portal, stuff like that. But I think that's really where Utah's going to fit, right? I think based on their potential on paper, they have what it takes to kind of be in the mix, right? And I think you're going to see them, at least be competitive, and people think that they can be competitive. But the real question is just, can it all come together? With so many players coming over from the transfer portal on the offensive side especially, it takes time to gel. I mean, I think there's positions that help Utah in the sense that the offensive line works together. They've played together. That one's going to be connected. And then you've got a quarterback that has seemingly done really well in Jason Beck's offense. I think those things can work well, but it's still unsure how that will go against, teams in the Big 12. So I think it's a good spot for Utah. You're not going to get this preseason pub where you're a top 25 team, but you're lurking, we'll say. And so I think whether you're, the second tier, third tier type team in the Big 12, I think that's good for Utah. And I think they can do some damage if they live up to the potential that they have for themselves.
I hate to make the Retzlaff stuff a football story. I really do. But this is a sports talk radio show. And so I will ask you, while we're all kind of awaiting word about how this is going to play out, Brian Santiago made his first comments, I think, to you guys is where I saw that since taking over as AD. And he said what you would expect. They're going to let the process play out. He has confidence it'll work out, blah, 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 blah. If the Retzlaff stuff comes to the point where they just have decided they've got to move on from him, what does that make BYU's football season look like, and do they have good depth in that room?
Yeah, that one's the real tricky question there, because coming into spring camp, they had 3 quarterbacks, including Retzlaff. And you have experience. McKay Helsted, was up at Utah State, had obviously started for them and had some success. But it would be a definite drop off from that. They did get some in the transfer portal and stuff that way. But I think that becomes probably the biggest worry for this team, where they're predicted at 7.5 wins as well. And obviously coming off the season that they had, there's a lot of expectations for this team to be good. But if you don't get a good quarterback that knows the system and has that chemistry, especially if there is this off the field drama with, I don't know if players are frustrated with this, what their feelings are. It has a real chance to distract, even if you have a good quarterback in place, to distract from kind of what you built last year, right? And I think coming into from last year, this was a team that was overlooked. They kind of believed in themselves. They rallied around themselves and really just kind of insulated themselves from the world. And when it started to work, things jived, right? Now you've got this huge off-season hurdle that you have to manage. And whether you have Retzlaff back or not, that becomes a real distraction to just what you're trying to do as a team, right? Obviously, the things that are being alleged are way more serious than what football is. But at the same time, when we're just speaking about the football, that becomes a very massive distraction, as it should, right? I mean, I think if there's something serious that happens like that, it should be a distraction. But I think that's unfortunate to these guys that have put in their hard work and effort to be able to get there, to suddenly have something that didn't even impact them now distract them from kind of the success that they were hoping to build.
All right, Josh, before I set you loose, look, I don't know if the narrative of Alex is going to hire Andre Miller was just something that we created out of thin air, or maybe it was people pining for Utah basketball of the past and believing that 1-2 punch would be really dynamic. And I maintain, as somebody who was there in the 90s, that Andre has a level of cachet for my generation that is hard to find. But it looks like it's not going to be anything that we'll see, at least not anytime soon. Do you have any insight here? Do you know whether or not it was ever really discussed, or it was ever really close? And maybe is there a chance that it could happen at some point, even though it doesn't look like it's going to happen now?
Yeah, there was definitely some real conversations about that. I mean, there was mutual interest between Alex and Andre to be able to bring him on staff. I think with what Alex was trying to build for his first year, and just kind of the output that he was expecting, I just don't know that there was the right fit, right? Obviously, Andre is a great ambassador of the program. He was going to be a great salesman for the U. He was going to bring a lot of excitement. Those weren't the questions. I think it was more just with what Alex was trying to do this year, what kind of commitment level it would take, and I just don't think they were able to agree on that. So, whether he's able to circle back to that in a future time, remains to be seen. I think, there's definitely not a door closed there, but I think Alex is trying to do the best that he can to bring his model and not necessarily bring back the Rick Majerus era. He's still going to play homage to it, try to bring in that kind of era and kind of get people excited. But at the end of the day, this is the Alex Jensen era, excuse me. And he's got to do what he can to be able to be the guy and not live off the coattails of somebody else.
All right, Josh, good to catch up, man. Appreciate the time as always. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon.
Sounds great. Appreciate it, Spence.
All right, Josh Furlong stops by today, courtesy of our good friends at IFA Country Stores. When the seasons change, like right about now, if you're like any good coach, you'll put together your game plan for a healthy green lawn, and you'll turn to the experts at IFA. Check out their 4+ lawn care program, everything you need to make your yard a hit. It's the ultimate lawn owner power move at IFA and IFA.coop. All right, we've got 1 hour in the books. We got 3 hours to go. We'll switch gears coming up on the other side. A massive game 1 tonight. It is Edmonton and it is Florida. It is a rematch of the Stanley Cup Finals last year. We're just a few weeks away from the NHL draft. So what do the Utah Mammoth need to do to improve their lot in the NHL ecosystem? Neil Smith will join us coming up on the other side. Then we have Andy Larson later on, and Ute legend and future Hall of Famer Eric Weddle. Busy Wednesday show. It's good to have you with us on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. We are your home of the Stanley Cup Finals here in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the surrounding areas. We have a rematch of the Stanley Cup Final from a year ago that went 7 games. Florida won the first 3. Edmonton came back and nearly pulled off one of the greatest comebacks in Stanley Cup history, and then Florida was able to get it done. Game 7. So tonight you can hear Game 1 on our radio station, and Neil Smith stops by to talk some hockey on a Wednesday. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
I'm very good, Spence. How about yourself?
I'm great. Appreciate the time. First question, randomly, did you ever work for Jim Dolan?
Oh, yeah.
You did. Okay. That's what I thought. I thought that you did. So as somebody who worked for the current, still the guy that owns the Rangers and the Knicks, we exchanged a few texts, and I exchanged a few texts with some other people as well. And I'm biased because, Tom Thibodeau was Jeff's assistant, and we got to know him. And, also, by the way, he's a great coach that just did something for you that nobody's done in 30 years. And look, you handle it however you want. You're a very nice guy. You're a gentleman. I'm sure I'm not asking you to rip anybody to shreds, but what was it like working for him? Shed some insight into, listeners that maybe don't really have a full picture, and your thoughts on him moving on from Coach Thibodeau.
Well, Jim is his own guy. I mean, he's different than all the other people that I've run into in that kind of position. He obviously inherited a good deal of his wealth from Cablevision, who was able to buy the Madison Square Garden from Paramount, and they've had it ever since. Jim was he was a little bit unpredictable when I was there, and you really you weren't sure what you were going to get from day to day, or how he was going to feel about certain things, and sometimes the view that he took of things were a view that you hadn't heard of before. So it was difficult. Let me say it was very difficult.
One follow-up question. We'll move away from Dolan specifically because, as my mother often says, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Advice that I probably should adhere to more. But just how, and this is going to sound like a simp question, and maybe it is, but just how important is viable, balanced, consistent ownership when it comes to the success of a professional sports team?
There's nothing more valuable than that. You can have all the great players, all the great coaches, all the great GMs, all the great everything. But if you have somebody at the very top who owns it and who you ultimately everybody reports to that's unstable, or that doesn't let the people below who are knowledgeable and have been doing the sport their whole life, if they don't let them run that business, that sports business, you've got no chance, none whatsoever. You've got to allow your people to do what they do. And if you don't, you won't get the result you want.
What have been your early impressions with the Smith Entertainment Group and Ryan and Ashley, and the way they've kind of been able to conduct their business to support Bill Armstrong, his staff, Coach Torney, and his staff after only 1 year here in Salt Lake?
Well, the one thing that I can say from a long ways away is that the Smith family stays out of the limelight. They stay out of the they seem to stay out of the operational part of it. You don't hear their name coming up saying that, they wanted to do this or wanted to do that. They're very much in the background, which is what a really smart owner does. They stay in the background. They oversee the professional people that have got a background in the sport, but they stay in the background and just do have leadership skills to lead those people that know the sport really well and know how to work in the environment, but they don't interfere with the way they've got to work in the environment. And I think that the Smiths, from what I understand, have done really well at that. And I'll point to one thing. It would have been easy for the new owner to fire everybody coming from Phoenix. You'd had no success there. What makes you think they're going to have any success here? Let's get a whole new management group. But he didn't do that. He gave them all a chance to prove themselves. Obviously, to this point, he likes what he's seen, and he's staying steadfast with Bill Armstrong and his group. And I really believe that's the way you lead. You make your observations, you give people enough time, you see how they work, and then you make your decision from there.
Were you ever strongly encouraged or straight up forced to go see a JD and the Straight Shot show in New York?
No, never.
Okay.
That never happened back then.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, macro 30,000-foot view question. Neil is a proud Canadian. Look, whether it's Edmonton or any other Canadian team, but what would it mean? 32 years since the Stanley Cup was won by a Canadian team, which is pretty wild because y'all are the best hockey country and have been for quite some time. What would it mean to just the country of Canada for Edmonton to pull this off?
I think it would mean a lot, only because Canada's, compared to the United States, is a very small population-wise compared to the U.S., and they've got the big elephant sitting next door being the U.S. that seems to be good at everything and win everything, and, Hollywood and all the rest of it. So for a Canadian team to win the Cup after all these years, and it does mean a lot to a lot of Canadians. Now, the people in Calgary aren't cheering for Edmonton, because that's their bitter rival.
Right, yeah.
So just as, there wasn't a lot of Toronto Maple Leafs fans hoping that Montreal would win in '93 against LA. That's the last Stanley Cup they got. But for the majority of Canadians, I do think that, if it's Edmonton versus Florida and you're living in Manitoba or you're living in Ontario, I think you're probably going to cheer for the Canadian-based team over the American-based team, only because it's in Canada. But what makes me laugh about the whole thing is all of these teams in the NHL are divided up amongst many nationalities, Canadian and American being two of them. And so you might be cheering for Edmonton, but you might be cheering for a lot of American players and a lot of Russian players and so on. So you cheer for your city where you're from, and then I guess once your city's gone, if you're in Canada, and again, I stress it, it's a smaller country, you cheer for the country.
Before we get to the game tonight, excuse me, and this iteration of the series, what are your memories of this 7-game barn burner from last year between these two?
Well, I had predicted Florida to win since the regular season last year, and so when they got off to that 3-0 lead on Edmonton, it didn't surprise me. But when Edmonton came roaring back and won 3 straight, that did surprise me, and that set up for a Game 7 that was spectacular. Florida, of course, as you mentioned in the Open, winning it, I think it was 2-1. They're both great teams. They're both a notch above everybody else, and they're deserving of being in the final. And this is a great final for the National Hockey League, because you don't have a Cinderella team going in against a favorite. That happens sometimes. Some team that has a wild card spot ends up, by hook or by crook, getting all the way to the final, and then they face the best team from the other conference. And so this year you've got the two teams that, as the playoffs went on, you could clearly see that Florida was a notch above the rest of the East, and Edmonton a notch above the rest of the West. Now, one could point out, well, they both ended in third place in their division. Yeah, that happens. It does happen. And not everybody that wins the President's Trophy, which is first overall, which Winnipeg won, ends up in the final. In fact, very few do. So, they've gotten healthy at the right time. They've got all their gears in order at the right time, and I'm really excited about this series.
So let's attack this individually before we get to the matchup, and let's start with Edmonton. They just have been able to respond to adversity throughout this run in a very impressive way. Comebacks left and right, like they almost pulled off last year in the Stanley Cup final, but they lose the first 2 games of their first series against the Kings. They win 4 straight. They open Game 1 of the second round series against the Golden Knights by giving up the first 2 goals before setting a Stanley Cup playoff record with their 5th consecutive comeback victory. And then against the Stars scores 6 straight goals to take Game 1, And then they gave up 5 goals total over the next 4 games to advance to the final. So it's this interesting thing where all of their series, they don't start out all that well, but then they figure something out, and then they're just ruthless. So let's start with the Oilers takeaways, and then we'll get to the Panthers, and we'll talk about the matchup. What stands out most about this run from Edmonton, Neil?
Well, the obvious is the most important thing, and that's Connor McDavid, number 97. I mean, he leads the playoffs again this year in scoring, and when he gets the opportunity, which he won't get a lot of them against Florida, but when he gets the opportunity to dance and go at that high speed he can go at, and he is marvelous to watch and can do crazy good things for the Oilers. So. He plays on a line with Nugent Hopkins, who's having the best playoff of his life, and then 40-year-old Corey Perry is on his other side that won the MVP of the league way back when he was with the Ducks in 07 or 08. And that's a formidable line because Corey Perry takes no prisoners physically, and Nugent Hopkins is a first overall pick, and Connor McDavid is McDavid. There's nobody else even like him. And then on the second line, this is your second line, has Draisaitl in the middle, who's leading the league in goals again this year. And you've got a tough guy with him in Evander Kane, and then Kasperi Kapanen on his other side. So their first 2 lines are really good. They've got a bomb of a shot on the point on the power play, and Evan Bouchard. Matthias Ekholm, who plays on his left side, is a really good defenseman, puck-moving defenseman. And then I'll just skip to goal. And then goal is the one place where they definitely take a back seat to Florida because Stuart Skinner, although he's played really well in these playoffs, and so is Kelvin Pickard, his backup, he's always going to be a question mark until he can get it done. Is he going to be able to play to the Bobrovsky level that he needs to play at to be able to beat the Panthers?
Now over to the Panthers. What stands out most to me, Neil, is I'm kind of looking at some of these numbers here. 19 different players have lit the lamp this postseason. So clearly tremendous depth. They're averaging more goals per game than they were last year. They're giving up fewer goals per game than they did last year as well. Their power play has been better, and their penalty kill is the best in the playoffs. So clearly there's a lot to like, and there's not a lot to nitpick about the Panthers. What should we know about them prior to Game 1 tonight?
Well, what's really going to be interesting, and it may be on the first face-off, if the 2 coaches, or let's say the visitors, have to put their lineup in first, and if they put in Barkov's line, Barkov, Reinhart, and Rodriguez, the thing that's amazing is they'll go up against Connor McDavid and Nugent Hopkins and Perry. But Barkov won this year for the second year in a row the Selke Trophy, which is the best defensive forward in the league, and he is terrific at that. So he'll go head-to-head against McDavid to try to shut him down. But here's the other part: that out of the 3 finalists for the Selke Trophy, Sam Reinhart was the other one. And he plays on that line. And then you've got Evan Rodriguez, who did a lot of damage in last year's playoffs and can score. Their second line can score with their Hagee and Bennett and Tkachuk. And, of course, Bennett and Tkachuk are most known for irritating the living heck out of the visiting team and whoever they play against. That, we haven't even mentioned Brad Marchand yet, the former captain of the Bruins, who plays on the line with Lundell and Luostarinen. They got a terrific top 3 lines there, and maybe not the star-studded McDavid, Draisaitl type of name that everybody's heard of, but guys that can all put the puck in the net, and that's why you say so many different players have scored for the Panthers. And I like their defense. Aaron Ekblad has been good offensively this playoff, and Forsling was great last year. But Seth Jones, that they got in a trade from Chicago before the deadline, has really added some great 1B depth. So if Aaron Ekblad is 1A, Seth Jones is at least 1B. And then you've got Bobrovsky, who pretty much a household name now if you watch hockey, because he won it all for them last year.
All right, now that we've learned about both these teams individually, right now the money as far as betting goes on sportsbooks going towards Edmonton pretty overwhelmingly. How do they match up? And X factors for both sides as far as how you think this thing's going to go?
They match up extremely well. I think that the Oilers are not going to get the opportunities that they got against Dallas, Vegas, or in the first round against the LA Kings. They're not going to get those because they're going to be Florida's a very good shutdown team. Florida's going to have to capitalize on the few chances they get. And again, I think it goes back, Spence, to Stuart Skinner versus Sergei Bobrovsky. If one of them lets in a bad goal, it's going to be huge. And when I say a bad goal, it doesn't mean they should score from center. It just means a shot that they should have had that they somehow didn't get, and the other team takes the lead. So I would expect tonight that Edmonton would start out slow. They seem to always do that at home for some reason. And Florida's ready for them. I mean, they've had more rest. Both teams are very well rested. The other thing I should mention is that Zach Hyman dislocated his wrist against Mason Marchment on the Dallas Stars in that series, and he's a huge part of the Edmonton Oilers. If he was playing, he would have been one of the names I would have brought up when we talked about Edmonton, but he's out of the lineup. That's a bit of a blow. If you ask me to pick a winner, and we do it on our podcast all the time, I don't know which way to go. I've been calling Florida for a long time now, so I would stick with that. But nothing would surprise me in this series. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because based off of everything that I've been reading and watching, I've heard a lot of people straight up say this is a pick'em and it could go one way or the other. Are you surprised that the majority of the public money is going the way of the Edmonton Oilers?
I am, and I think that they might, just be in love with the Connor McDavid factor and the Leon Draisaitl factor and the new guys on the block, and this is a revenge cup, and that has favored the team that didn't win the year before in a lot of times. I can tell you that for sure Florida's not as sexy as Edmonton because they don't have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and these guys, so they're not as sexy, but they're a hardworking team. You should compare two great coaches. Chris Knobloch for the Edmonton Oilers has done a fantastic job. He came in partway through last season, led them to the final, and now he's leading them to the final again. And then, of course, Paul Maurice, who's in his fourth year with the Florida Panthers and has done a terrific job there. Their first year, they upset the record-breaking Boston Bruins in the first round, and then last year we know what they did, and now here they are again this year. So they're terrific, well-prepared teams. The coaches are going to have them really going hard, and again, I think it is a pick'em thing. I don't know why all the money would be going towards Edmonton, other than if people just, as I said, just think, well, it's their turn, so I'm going with them.
14 of the 23 quote-unquote experts on ESPN.com's hockey page has Edmonton winning the series. Tell me about these two coaches, Neil, and then attendant to that question, oftentimes when you get this late into the season and you're playing for a trophy, you do make adjustments here or there, game to game, but more often than not, you kind of are who you are this late in the season, and we're just going to do what we do. But tell me about these two coaches and what sort of adjustments you think will be necessary for one or the other to come out on top.
Well, Chris Knobloch with the Oilers has to get that power play going. Their power play hasn't been nearly what it was last year, and their penalty killing either, but especially their power play. He's got to get when the Panthers take a bad penalty or take a penalty, they've got to be able to threaten to take advantage of that. Because one of the things about the Panthers is they play that dirty, grimy game where they want to get in your face all the time. On the other side, they're going to have to lock down McDavid and Draisaitl, and that's a hard job. But they've got two of the best guys for that in Barkov and Reinhart, and as I said, backed up by two guys with Bennett and Tkachuk. But Paul Maurice has been around for a long, long, long time, a really good coach. And I don't think there'll be a better prepared team than the Florida Panthers. But Chris Knobloch, whose assistant, by the way, is Paul Coffey, the great Paul Coffey. He runs the defense for them, and he's won a few Stanley Cups. So they're going to be well prepared too. It's hard to. You might hear it in my voice. I can't give the edge to anybody.
Yeah.
They're both great, and they're both deserving.
Is there kind of a mini rivalry budding here? I mean, you referenced Bennett and Kachuk, who are just irritants no matter what. And maybe it's because McDavid is Canadian and you're nicer than we are. But I listened to an interview with him, and he didn't indicate there was very much bad blood. But these two teams saw each other a year ago in a 7-game series. Does it feel like there's an underlying dislike, sports hatred kind of brewing here? Or these two teams that are maybe not necessarily in a space where they have bad feelings for one another, even though this is the second straight Stanley Cup final they'll be battling for?
I think if they don't have bad feelings for each other, they will have about 10 minutes into the game because that's how intense this thing will be.
Yeah.
And they do have negative feelings. I mean, one team walked off with the cup, the other team walked off in tears. And so Connor McDavid wants to cement his legacy by winning a Stanley Cup. It's one thing to be the greatest player in the league. That's all good and well, but you got to win a cup to really cement how good you are, and that's what Connor McDavid really wants to do. At the other end, they're going to try to stop them from. They want to win their second in a row, as their cross-state rival, the Tampa Bay Lightning, did just not too long ago. So it's going to be a battle, and I think that Draisaitl and McDavid are going to want the one thing they have never had, and that is a Stanley Cup. And we'll see. I mean, you'll know some stuff 5-10 minutes into the game. You're already going to see some things happening. And as I said, you sit down right from the opening face-off. Don't miss a minute of this one.
So before I do have one more Utah Mammoth question for you before I set you loose, but it sounds like based off of the way you've been breaking down the potential of this series and everything I'm kind of reading and watching, there's nothing better than a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we didn't get one in the conference finals. Does it feel like this has a good chance to go the distance?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've always said, and you could hear me say this on the podcast, sometimes when I'm projecting who's going to win the series, I say I go full chicken, meaning I go Game 7, because I feel that's the chicken's way out, is to say it'll go 7. You're really hedging your bets. But in this one, just from watching them last year, just from watching how great they are this year, just from knowing the type of thirst and hunger that these two teams have to win the Cup, they know they're 4 wins away from the great trophy of the Stanley Cup. So I would not at all be surprised if it didn't go 7. And in fact, if you made me name how many games it's going to go, that's the only one I would say is 7.
Let's move over to a couple of off-season initiatives and potentials for the Utah Mammoth to add some pieces. And we'll start with the draft, where the Utah Mammoth jumped from 14 to 4. Here's my question. It's just more of a big picture, general type question, because I've seen a bunch of mock drafts. I think a lot of people believe the Mammoth need to add to the defensive portion of their team, but according to what I've read, feels like a stretch for even the best defensive players in this draft. How often, and look, there are always unicorns and there are always opportunities that sometimes we don't see, but how often are these young kids ready to play right away? When you're drafting at 4, that's very high. Is it realistic for Bill Armstrong and his staff to bring in instant help to the hockey club, or will it be a situation where they draft a young prospect and watch him grow internationally or in juniors and such?
It will probably be a case of drafting a young player and watching him get better in junior. Right now, Jake O'Brien is rated number 4 in the draft, who's a 6'2" center playing in Brantford, Ontario. And right behind him is Radek Murka, who's a 6'5" defenseman playing in Seattle. So, I don't know how close those two guys are on the Mammoth's rating of their scouts. But, you probably fall in around there, and who knows, maybe they could play. Defensemen usually don't play the first year because defense is a much harder position to learn, because one mistake and it could be in your net. So a defenseman it takes more time than a forward. But it's possible the kid could play this year. More than likely, they'll put him back to give him more time to develop.
Let me ask you about your former club, the New York Islanders, as the lottery delivered a franchise-altering opportunity to them with the number one overall pick, and it seems like people debate the Matthew Schaefer kid against the Michael Misa kid. I'm not going to sit here, Neil, and tell you I've been grinding tape on either of these two players. I don't know anything about them. Do you have a preference, and who do you think the Islanders land on and why?
Well, first of all, there's a kid from Long Island in this draft rated third, I think, James Higgins, and plays at Boston College. And so it'll be interesting to see if the Islanders are swayed at all by the fact that he's from Long Island, that they would go that direction. But, I just, Schaefer and Misa are not that far apart, I guess. I mean, I would think that usually the guy that was ranked number one in the middle of the season was Matthew Schaefer, and he's still ranked number one at the end of the season. That tells me that he's probably going to be number one. But again, I haven't been grinding tape either, Spence, to see how he's playing.
All right, before I say you lose, last week we went over the free agent list. We will not do that again this week. I'll just ask you this before I set you loose. The projected cap space for the Utah Mammoth is about $21 million. They have all their picks, and so they have optionality. That's the new buzzword in roster construction and pro sports these days. Prior to the start of the season, what would you say to the fan base about what you'd like to see Bill and his staff do, just generally speaking, whether it is a continued brick-by-brick build or maybe expedite the growth of the young players with some veteran pieces? What do you think the boxes that need to be checked for this hockey team next year to take that proverbial next step and maybe even make the playoffs?
Well, two things. I'd really like to see them get a player that has a lot of experience, maybe a little bit longer in the tooth than the people that they've got there right now, but can bring some pedigree that have been winning. Yeah, not a 40-year-old, but I mean, certainly somebody that has been around as one and that can help the younger players. They had Ian Cole there for that very reason already. So I'd love to see it if they could do that. And then if they could, and if it fits with their program, and I know they have the money to get one of these top guys, if they can, a Marner, a Besser, Nikolai Ehlers that played in Winnipeg, those three seem to be the top three names. I mean, that would give some star power also to the Mammoth and perhaps raise them up another notch in the another notch up in the standings and be able to get into the playoffs next year.
Is there like a cool Neil Smith Stanley Cup final watch party that I did get invited to? How are you going to be watching the game?
No, I'm going to be swell. The watch party is going to be me, my 8-month-old yellow lab, Sammy, will be sitting on one side of me, and my 12-year-old chocolate lab, AJ, will be sitting on the other side of me. We'll be staring at an 86-inch screen that I have above my mantle, and we might even have a few beverages together. I'll bring out their bowl and pour some Bud Light in their bowl.
Dogs welcome, people tolerated, Neil, is my personal philosophy. That sounds like a good time. Hey, before I say you lose, tell our listeners where they can go get that podcast of yours.
Well, Apple Podcasts platform is great. You can get it on Spotify. You can watch us on YouTube. It's on every platform you can think of. So whatever platform you use for podcasts, we're on there at NHL Wraparound. And as I've said every week, I think that anybody that listens or watches will learn something. We've always got entertaining guests, and we have a lot of fun doing it.
Neil, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Excited to get going tonight, so enjoy it with the doggos, and we'll chat soon, okay?
Hey, did you tell your dad I was on last week? Remember, he was in town, I think, when I talked to you.
I did. Yeah, no, I let him know, and I sent him the link to listen to the interview, so hopefully he did. But I'm going to let you check in with him on that because he'll lie to me and says he listens every day, so that's going to be up to you.
All right, Spence, take care.
Thank you, Neil. Neil Smith, the great Neil Smith, helping us learn about this pro sport that we now have in this market. I always appreciate his time. Stops by today, courtesy of our friends at IFA Country Stores. Summer vacations and warmer weather are just beyond the horizon. As the days grow longer and brightly colored flowers begin making their appearance, it's time to start planning and applying Step 2 of IFA's 4+ annual lawn care program. That's designed with a blend of vital macro and micronutrients. IFA's Step 2 fertilizer promotes strong roots and vibrant colors in your yard at IFA and IFA.coop. Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final between Edmonton and Florida is tonight, coming up at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. So right when we say goodnight at 6 here on the show, we will turn our coverage over to the Stanley Cup Finals. Then tomorrow the NBA Finals get going. We also have the NBA Finals on our radio station. So keep it here. We'll catch a quick break. We still have Andy Larson and Eric Weddle set to join us on a busy Wednesday drive. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. Got Andy Larson on the program today. Salt Lake Tribune. Covers the Jazz, and that's a data column for them. We'll do some Jazz and some NBA draft, some NBA finals with Andy. Eric Weddle, college football future Hall of Famer. He's on the ballot this year. Ute legend rolls by. We'll get to the 5 o'clock hour of the show before we say goodnight at 6 in time for the Stanley Cup playoffs. What's your favorite nut? What's the best nut? I shout out Nicole in our office. Love Nicole. She has a lovely basket of snacks. So if you're not in the mood to spend $7 on a Snickers in our little canteen or whatever the hell it is, you can always walk back and say hello to Nicole. She's got some pistachios. She's got some cereal bars and some oatmeal if you'd like.
Good to know.
So I grabbed some pistachios. Pistachios, that's got to be on the short list of the best nut. It does.
It might be the best nut, but the caveat on that is that to get to it, unless you're...
No, these are shellless.
That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're a shellless pistachio guy...
Are you calling me lazy?
No, it's just it's a privilege.
What are you talking about?
You know, someone shell in those peanuts.
Are you saying I have white privilege because I'm eating pistachios without shells?
No, you have pistachio privilege.
A new thing.
You know,
I like a good cashew. I like a good salted peanut.
Almonds are really good.
Almonds are underrated. Like smoked almonds. Have you ever tried the wasabi almonds?
Those are good.
Those are lovely.
I'm a big nut guy. I'm a trail mix. It doesn't surprise you. A lot of oats and nuts and granola bars and such.
Best nut.
Shelled pistachios usually.
Text in 877-3530. So see, this is a really interesting radio lesson. I could ask our listeners, like, text in who's going to win, Edmonton or Florida. We get 2 texts. I bet right now, 877-3530-700. Text in your favorite nut. We're about to get 50 texts.
You're probably right.
That's just how kind of sports talk radio works. Eric Weddle, College Football Hall of Famer.
He's a nut.
He is a nut, in a good way.
Just to be clear.
In a good way. I mean, this feels like a no-brainer. Interesting to hear from Josh Furlong with his breakdown of that earlier. I did not know Josh was involved with that committee. Anyway, he does not get the votes he needs to make the College Football Hall of Fame?
There is a way. There's a lot of ways just because of how it's set up and how many people there are kind of eligible. You know, he's one of bunch of different candidates, and some of these guys, like Josh mentioned, are candidates that have been on the ballot for like 100 years, right? So there's quite a few scenarios which Eric doesn't land on the College Football Hall of Fame, but I think he's a guy who very much should be there. I'll be honest, and maybe this is a hot take until you really dive into the numbers. Eric Weddle may have as good or better a case for the Pro Football Hall of Fame than he does for the one he just got nominated for. A guy that, let's be clear, was really good in college, played both sides of the ball, but he did leave early and went and started his NFL career and is one of like 5 defensive backs to reach the amount of tackles, interceptions. It's just a remarkable career for a guy who, you know, I think is a Hall of Famer, college, pro, whichever way you slice it.
We'll get EWED coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. Random question, non sequitur. You ready for it?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer may be simply it's the NFL. The answer may be simply it's football, and America loves football. But it's an interesting dynamic all the time for me when I hear people break down an NBA Finals between 2 teams that play in small markets. If the Super Bowl this year was the Steelers and the Packers, it would not affect viewership a single iota. And you don't hear people say, well, the Steelers play in Pittsburgh and the Packers are in Green Bay.
Yeah.
Yet every time there's an NBA Finals, it doesn't feature the Lakers or the Celtics or I'll say the Knicks, even though it's been years. I mean, hell, they almost got there and they fired their coach. Or the Heat or the Bulls or whatever. Every time there's an NBA Finals that feature 2 teams that aren't in big markets, all of the debate shows just hammer it. And, you know, we've had some fun with our ESPN guests, guys like McMiniman and McMahon and those dudes. about, the fact that they've got to spend the next couple of weeks in either Oklahoma City or Indianapolis. By the way, Indianapolis is a very nice city. I've been there several times. OKC, not so much. But you never hear this discourse when the NFL has a Super Bowl with two teams that play in smaller markets. Is the answer simply because football is football? Or is there something deeper there?
There's a few ways you can cut that up because the NFL is different, right? Number one, when you talk about a small market, Green Bay and Pittsburgh are not huge markets, but those are also like two of the most historical teams. Like that's the Lakers and Celtics when you talk NFL, right? When you're talking about historical relevance, when you're talking about, it's almost flipped where even though they're not in huge markets in Green Bay and in Pittsburgh, they kind of flip the script on who's notable. And I think there's some truth to the fact that it is the NFL. You play 16 to 20 games every year, and you really don't have any trouble selling those games on site, on TV. There's nothing that's going to hold you back in that regard. I don't know, man. I just think that there's a little bit more paid attention to. Well, number one, the Super Bowl is always on its own place, right? It's always a neutral event, so that's a different scenario. But I don't know. For me, that's something that I think that you just got to get over in the sports world. These are all we're talking about small markets. They're still like when you're talking about a global scale, these are huge, giant cities that are more than capable of putting on an event, putting on a showcase. And when the NBA starts to have players that are not excited to go to certain cities, not excited to play here and there, there's media members covering it. I think there's kind of a culture around basketball, maybe, that, as you mentioned, is something deeper. Because to me, it doesn't hit the radar, but it does seem to be a conversation on basketball spheres really often.
And there's a little apples and oranges here. The Super Bowl is a one-off. It's a game.
Yeah.
It's one game,
one
right?
night.
And so these media members, and by the way, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to Green Bay. I've never been to Lambeau. It's on my bucket list. Don't mean this disrespectfully to Pittsburgh or Buffalo or wherever. The conversation might sound different if media members, fans, or whatever. And the Super Bowl changes venues, and oftentimes the venues in the cities are cool cities and destination places. So you're not necessarily going to live in Green Bay for the next 2 weeks to watch Green Bay play Pittsburgh. You're not going to live in Buffalo, respectfully, in January and February, where it is miserable in Western New York, to watch the Bills play whoever for the course of it really probably does boil down to the Super Bowl is a one-off. It's one game. It is a event where people that oftentimes don't know anything about football or the NFL go to Super Bowl parties or have people at their house, and you have dinner and you play the square game and you have some fun side things going on and the kids are out. Like, it's an event in the way the NBA Finals is not. And if this thing goes 7 games, Oklahoma City and Indianapolis, if it goes 7 games, media members and fans, if you're an NBA fan and you have the means and the time on your hands to go to the NBA Finals, you will exist in Oklahoma City and Indiana for the better part of 2 weeks. That's a different ask. So maybe it's as reductive as the Super Bowl is one game, it's one day, it's in L.A., it's in Glendale, it's in Florida, it's wherever, in New York one year. So you only have to go there for one day. You don't have to go exist in the city or in the cities that you don't necessarily want to be in for longer than just a few hours. So there's probably something there. And it is interesting when it comes to viewership and eyeballs. Nothing adversely affects the NFL. Nothing. Sunday Night Football is the highest watched television show, period, in the United States. There's not a higher watched show, not an award show, not a finale of whatever. Like, more people sit down on a Sunday night to watch NFL football than any other television experience that we have in the country, period. And the NBA Finals draws healthy ratings, but when you look, and this goes into the market conversation that we just don't have when we're talking about football. Knicks Pacers ratings for TNT through the roof. Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Western Conference Finals ratings for ESPN on that side of things, lower than it's been, I think, since 2016. And the Timberwolves are awesome, and Oklahoma City is like historically special. But because it wasn't the Lakers against the Mavericks or whatever it was, Western Conference Finals ratings down. And it has zero to do with whether or not these are good teams. It has nothing to do with the product. The Timberwolves and the Thunder are both really good. They're both probably better than the Knicks. Knicks Pacers, of course, features a team that exists in New York, the number one media market in the country. And the ratings for that series through the roof. Just kind of interesting to consider because nothing adversely affects ratings for pro football. All right. I want to tell you about my new friends at Utah Elite Services. With summer on the way, it's the perfect time to be introducing our newest partner of the ESPN Sports Network, Utah Elite Services, a Utah-grown asphalt maintenance and concrete repair company. We've seen rain, snow, and wind, and now we're going to see some heat. Your concrete has been through a lot. If you see any cracks or extreme damage that needs to be fixed, give Utah Elite Services a call. Corey's team can take care of crack sealing, coating, striping, right? Striping, not stripping. Hey, don't judge me. When I first heard about these, our guys and what they do, you strip decks and such. That's a thing for
You're
people.
not wrong.
Right?
You're not wrong.
What's striping?
Do you
even know?
Like paint stripes.
Okay, well maybe
they can put stripes on your parking lots.
I bet they strip things too.
Basketball court lines.
Yeah, okay, they can do that.
Maybe stripping too. I think that's a different place you call for that.
All right. Well, anyway, you need behave yourself. Okay, our friends at Utah Elite Services can help you out if you see some cracks in your concrete, if you see extreme damage that needs to be fixed. So again, crack sealing, coating, striping, or stripping. Just give them a call. Asphalt overlays, complete tear-outs, and replacement of your concrete. Don't let the concrete outside of your home, condo, or even business be a sore thumb. Get it fixed with Utah Elite Services. Give Utah Elite Services a call for a no-cost, no-obligation estimate at 801-821-8670. That's 801-821-8670, 801-821-8670. Those are our friends at Utah Elite Services. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Andy Larson, Eric Weddle. That's your 4 o'clock hour of the drive on a Wednesday. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. Stanley Cup Finals, Game 1 tonight. Oilers-Panthers, rematch of the Stanley Cup Finals from a year ago, will be heard on this little old radio station beginning at 6 o'clock after we say goodnight. Eric Weddle is going to join us. E-Wed is a finalist for the College Football Hall of Fame, former Ute legend, so stay tuned for that. But we'll start out the 4 o'clock hour of the program with Andy Larson, Salt Lake Tribune. Andy, happy Wednesday. How are we doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Give me a bucket list destination geographically somewhere in the world that you've never been to that you'd like to visit.
I still haven't been to Italy, and I need to do that. And then, I've been trying to figure out, where and how to do a Japan or Korea or something like that trip, given the language barrier. I don't know if it's a tour guide situation or what, but probably Italy is my number one answer still.
Can highly recommend Tokyo. I've decided my next stop is going to be Australia. I've never been to Australia. Have you been?
I have. In 2019, right before the world shut down, I did it as a stop on my Around the World tour, which was awesome. Spent 2 weeks there, bounced around different cities, went to the Great Barrier Reef. It was truly awesome. You need to go as soon as you can.
What's your favorite nut? I was munching on some pistachios earlier. I feel like pistachios has to be high on anyone's list.
That's a good question. I've been feeling like cashews
Ooh,
in
nice.
fried rice recently. This is really, really good.
Nice.
So I'll go with that.
Where do you get your fried rice, Andy?
So I used to get it from this place called Mai Tai on 13th and 3rd West, but it just closed about a month ago. So I'm kind of on the lookout for new spots. That place was right by the Jazz practice facility, so it was perfect. After practice, go and get some fried rice, and it was awesome. And the owner retired after 17 years. Just it was time, and so yeah, I got to say I'm searching. If you have any good ideas, let me know.
You watching any TV shows these days, Andy?
Ooh, I don't think so. I'm watching the sports. I'm sorry. It's important sports time.
You dating anyone?
No.
All right,
Maybe
moving.
a little bit. But anyway.
Yeah. You got to be careful. Andy. All right, we can move on. I'm in kind of a weird mood on a Wednesday. Several reasons why, but let's move on. All right. Let me ask you this. Did you catch wind of this Austin Ainge situation? Did you know this was in the pipeline, or did it catch you off guard the way that it seems to have caught everybody off guard?
Yeah, it caught me off guard. I did not know. I knew that there were changes in the front office, and I knew that, and we had reported some of them, right? Like the Carlos Boozer thing. There are a couple of other Jazz staffers who are no longer going to be with the team moving forward. And now in the wake of Austin Ainge being hired, it's looking like maybe there could be more changes. I truly, I don't want to say anything without having that confirmed from multiple sources, because obviously this is people's livelihoods. But I knew that there were changes being made. I thought they were happening at lower levels, right? Like I thought essentially the team was upset with kind of their scouting and player scouting setup, so that they made some kind of weird draft choices over the last couple of years. They haven't really identified that star. And so just talent recognition, I think, was kind of lacking since Dennis Lindsey was let go. And so I do think there was room to hire someone, but I'm surprised that it was at the president of basketball operations level. I'm surprised Austin Ainge is the number one guy. And had no idea that it was going to be Austin moving over here.
What other changes, and I may have missed something. So for our listeners, Carlos Boozer has been added to the staff as a scout. And I know you said you did not want to pontificate on possibilities, and I respect that because people's jobs are important to them. But what other changes are you alluding to that I may have missed?
Changes. So again, I'm trying to not use names here and until it's announced, until they find new jobs and stuff like that. But yeah, changes like in the 4th or 5th level of the organization. Maybe names that aren't familiar to fans, but are names more familiar to Jazz beat writers and obviously people in the day-to-day workings of the org.
All right, 10-4. How do you think? I've asked a couple guests this, and I'll preface it with you the same way I have with them. There are 30 NBA general manager jobs. And if you have one, you are very happy to have one, despite the circumstances around you. And Justin Zanuck is coming off a very trying year where he had some serious health complications. And, I've seen him a couple times since and seen him interviewed since. Seems like he's doing well. So I'm not implying anything at all with the question, nor am I leading the witness. I am wondering what you believe to be Jay-Z's reaction to kind of the changes around him and his place in this new ecosystem.
Look, publicly and privately, from all reports that I've heard about this, I haven't talked to Jay-Z about it, but is that he is taking this positively, right? Like he is, saying all the right things. He is, saying, hey, look, that Austin will be additive to our department, and what's best for the Jazz is what's best for me, and all that kind of good stuff. I also know how general managers think, and I know how executives think, and I know how just people think. And the truth is, if you were general manager of a team, if they go to somebody else to hire the president of basketball operations, and not only just another team's general manager, but another team's assistant general manager, a person lower on the totem pole than you are, then you probably don't feel great about it. And it is probably the kind of thing that makes you want to look around. Now, look, like Justin has a contract and, I think is well respected, and I think does have a lot to add to this organization. But I did think it was interesting that Ryan Smith made it extremely clear who was in charge when he did not do that in the Danny Ainge press conference. And I think it was interesting that he drew such a dividing line between Austin Ainge's skills and Justin Zanuck's skills, where he said, hey, look, Justin's, came up through the agency space and is good at that, is good at dealing with players and that sort of thing, whereas they feel that Austin came up through the scouting and coaching, has that experience. And so we'll be able to add kind of those, again, player evaluation and talent scouting to the organization. And kind of the implicit statement there is they don't feel like Justin has done a great job of that. Now, look, Justin hasn't been totally in charge over the last 3 years. It's been Danny Ainge too, and mostly Danny Ainge. There was a period of time where Justin was the number one guy after they fired Dennis Lindsey, and you ended up with the Rudy Gay summer, right? So it wasn't like a unadulterated success. But I do think, Justin's done some good things as well and made some smart moves. I think this year's trade deadline, frankly, was really well handled. And so you want that kind of guy around. It's just whether or not he wants to be around. And I think that's, still kind of an open question. If he can get another better job from another NBA team, it wouldn't be super surprising to see him take it.
So, Andy, as a 19-year-old, between my freshman and sophomore year at the University of Utah, I did an internship at Madison Square Garden where I had a connection, loosely. And my internship that summer was in the customer relations department, where my job was to answer phone calls from angry New Yorkers that didn't enjoy Billy Joel the night before or whatever. It was very interesting. And I worked in a department of people, and a lot of them were almost nervous to have me around and didn't really like to talk to me very much. I really had one friend. His name was Dave Snowden, ironically enough. He's still there. He founded the Wheelchair Knicks, and he's the sweetest guy. And went to dinner one night, and I'm like, dude, why don't these people just feel like they can, I'm a normal person. You can come talk to me, and I'll talk to you. And he laid a line on me at the age of 19 that I still talk about and think about to this day. And he said, Spence, it's important that at this point in your life, you understand one very simple truth, and that is nobody cheers for the son of a famous father. So thank you. Okay, there you go. So we move into this space where I feel like it's easy to have a conversation where two things can be true. That Austin benefited greatly from his last name and who his father was. And Austin has put in the groundwork and has the resume to qualify himself for a hire such as this. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, look, I think so. Like, I think, if you look at another team and they hire Austin Ainge, it's a little bit of a stretch because he's an assistant GM, not a GM, right? Like, but given the Celtics' success over the last decade, like, it does make sense, right? And so that's the thing that the Jazz can stand on this is that, look, like, hey, it's, he does have, he is well respected. He does have a ton of success, and it's hard to know, exactly, who drafted Jason Tatum instead of Markelle Fultz and who drafted Jaylen Brown. And who, but like clearly Austin was at least around during those times and helped make good choices. So, it's hard to say like, hey, this is a catastrophe. But I do think, like this is kind of the nepotism thing is, maybe it prevents you from opening up the job to other names. And I think that's where I think you can have some real criticism for the Jazz is like, if you are trying to compete in a 30-team NBA, you want to know as much about your competition as possible. And one of the easiest ways to do that is by having a round of significant and serious interviews for a president of basketball operations slot, right? Like, learn how these guys think, learn what they would do with your roster, get some free consulting, frankly, right? Like, and for them to kind of have bypassed that in order to hire, the son of the CEO and the guy who's friends with the owner, like, it's sketchy. It's not great. It's a really bad look. And I think the rest of the NBA was talking all about it this week. So I think that's where I think you can have significant criticism is like, look, if you do an overall search of the whole market and say, hey, Austin Ames is the best guy, cool. But you should really have, again, serious and significant interviews with other candidates in order to make that determination rather than, well, Danny thinks Austin Ames is great. Ryan Smith says Austin Ames is great. Will Hardy says Austin Ames is great. It's like, well, yes, for sure. Like, I think the reality is probably that Austin Ames is great. And yet also there are a gazillion other very smart men and women, I guess, covering and leading NBA franchises right now that you also could have talked to for this role and chose not to. And I think that's the disappointing part of it, I think, from a Jazz perspective.
Did it feel like to you, and I guess I'll use a Gen Z saying, as the kids would say, doing too much or extra or whatever. Did it feel like to you in the statements that were released and the comments mainly by Ryan that they just overcooked the qualifications that Austin has, that they just overcooked the whole, like, without really saying the quiet part out loud? Like, Danny wasn't even quoted, and it was never even acknowledged in any of the statements. Did it feel like to you that they were making a little bit too much of an effort, being a little extra when it came to just pointing out all of the things Austin has done in the statements? And were you surprised that Danny was not quoted, nor was he available at the media availability?
No, and I mean, I guess I don't think they were doing extra. Like, you kind of have to if you are the PR department of the Jazz and you're put in this position, right? Like, that's the thing you have to do. You have to say, hey, this isn't Danny Ainge hiring his son. It's like, look at all the things Austin Ainge has done. You have to give the fans a reason to believe, because if you do that, the fans are going to believe because they're fans. I was skeptical at the idea that Ryan just called Danny up one day and said, hey, I want to hire your son to be president of basketball operations. I think Ryan and Danny talk more often than that for it to have just been like, hey, got some bad or weird news that I'm hiring your kid. Like I just am skeptical that that's how that went down. But yeah, look, I mean, if you're trying to spin this if you are at all professional, you're trying to spin it at least a little bit. And the only way to spin it is by saying that Austin is qualified, but, in terms, he is going to be a relatively young general manager, or I guess relatively young professional president of basketball operations. And, while he does have 14 years of experience in the Boston Celtics organization, or whatever it is, 17, not all of that has been as assistant general manager. It's also been at like the scouting level and stuff like that, right? Like, so again, it's a reasonable resume, and a relatively good one, especially given how good the Celtics has been. But that's what you had to do if you're the Jazz. You can't just say, well, this is Danny Ainge's kid and try to spin it that way.
Skeptical that Ryan didn't talk to? There's no shot in hell. Are you kidding? That was the most insulting part of the entire scenario. Like, hey, Danny's been completely kept out of the loop. He had no idea I was doing this. I just told him what do you mean, Andy? There's no chance that was the case. Almost insulting that was said out loud.
Yeah, look, I mean, Ryan likes to tell a yarn that's probably not super based in reality sometimes. Has done it at press conferences before. I mean, he even copied like the old Greg Miller gas station story, right? Like, I am, that's Ryan Smith. that's Rand's.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And, I guess if it's working for you, just keep rolling with it. But, yeah, there's no shot. But when it comes to the Danny angle here, I've always been skeptical, personally, of really just how, for lack of a better term, invested in the day-to-day process that Danny is with the entire thing. Now, I want to be very fair. Danny retired. When he left the Celtics, he retired. He didn't move out here to work for the Jazz. Okay, that wasn't the reason he moved to Utah. He moved to Utah to be around his family. And I've never believed. Now, look, he's at the games. I see him at games. I see him at events. I'm not saying he's never there. But you reference kind of the original ambiguity when Danny was hired and the messaging from Jazz ownership about, like, I've always drawn the parallel between the Jim Halpert, Michael Scott office stuff, big picture, day to day, and was kind of like, who's doing what? All right. And it's kind of, does this to you indicate that Danny might even be a little bit further removed in valuing his Riverside tea times and hanging out with his grandkids now that Austin is in place and will be in place for a while? Do you think Danny's going to be even a little bit further removed from the scenario?
I'll say this, like, over the last couple of years, if Danny was truly removed, like, he was way more involved than I thought he would be from that press conference, right? Like, he was at random Stars games that I was at, that, the G League Salt Lake City Stars, that he had no reason to be at whatsoever, right? Like, you can successfully delegate the 10th man role on the Salt Lake City Stars and feel pretty good about it if you're Danny Ainge. And he didn't. Like, I was involved in that kind of weird stuff. Like, and was involved, like, was at morning shoot-arounds, again, for games that did not matter. And just was around, again, more than did scouting trips to the middle of the country for players you wouldn't think that Danny Ainge, if he were truly, like, just doing the golf tee time thing, that he would have been involved in. I think he was. That being said, I also had that same thought that you did, like, that, hey, maybe this is a way to get Danny to where he wants to be, where he feels comfortable golfing more and being with his grandkids more and all that kind of stuff. I could absolutely see, hey, that's why the Jazz decided to add another, the louder voice in the room. And, of course, you can get Danny on board by making it Austin. So, I think it's very plausible that that's what happened, but we'll see over the next couple of years. Like, I was surprised at how involved he was before now. It could be surprised again.
All right. In the spirit of listening to what these people say and then trying to understand what actually is real, let's move over to the response that Austin gave to the question that our very own Sean O'Connell asked about his personal philosophy on tanking or manipulating lineups, to which Austin responded, "You will not see that this year." Austin went on our guy John Paul's podcast. I would encourage people to go check out Round Ball Roundup and expanded on the answer. So, look, Andy, we know the deal here. It's a top 8 protected pick that goes to Oklahoma City, who most likely is about to win a world championship over the next week or so. And I would view it as an epic failure if that pick had to be conveyed to OKC if the Jazz win 34-35 games and end up drafting 9th in the lottery, and that goes to Oklahoma City. I view holding on to that asset as important as anything else this year. So if we take Austin at his word that they will approach this season with more integrity than they did in years past and be front-facing about injuries and availability, and not wait to get fined and then have Walker shoot 7 threes a game, and we actually see a serious basketball team this year, can they do that while also maintaining the spot they need to maintain to hold on to their draft capital?
It becomes really, really hard, even if you trade the veterans. Like, that's the tricky spot for me. So, like, you can trade Lauri Markkanen, you could probably trade Colin Sexton, you could probably trade John Collins. I don't think you can trade Jordan Clarkson unless it's packaged in a deal where you're giving up value. I don't think you're going to get a lot for those guys, but I think you can move them if you'd like. But whoever you get back is at least going to have salaries, and at least it's going to be on the roster. And, like, you'll have to play those guys too. You can't get, what's that, a combined $80 million in money off your books without taking some veteran contracts back, who then, yes, under kind of the Austin Ainge we won't tank rule, that you would have to play. And if you look at the bottom 8 of last year's draft pre-lottery, all of those teams tanked to some degree. None were as extreme as the Jazz, but like Washington definitely tanked at the end of the year. New Orleans did. Brooklyn tanked from the beginning of the year, trading Dennis Schroeder a month into the season. Let's see. Philadelphia definitely tanked at the end of the year. The Spurs even tanked once Wembanyama got hurt. Like, everyone actually was tanking by the end of the year. So I find it difficult to imagine that the Jazz won't have to do that to some degree in March and April in order to stay quote unquote competitive or really anti-competitive, right? Like, there's a real chance that if they try their hardest in all 82 games next year, that they end up with, that ninth pick, and then you just give it away to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I think you have to be really careful about how that plays out. And then if you do keep one of Lowry or Colin Sexton or John Collins, then all of a sudden you add more wins and get even closer to that line. So it's a really fine line that they're trying to get. And I think ultimately what's going to end up happening is you say, hey, no, we're not going to tank it all this year. And then, you end up just tanking in March or April, or maybe somebody gets hurt and you get a little bit lucky that way. But from what I hear, it is much more likely that the Jazz are bad next year and kind of embrace that from just a player talent point of view than that they, try to be good and trade for 3 stars or something like that.
So the Washington model is something that I've been considering over the past 24 or 48 hours or whatever, because Washington actually did try. But what they did, Bilal Coulibaly, Bub Carrington, and Jordan Poole is just a perfect vet to tank on your roster. They traded Kuz. They played Alex Sarr. They played Keyshawn George. They played Corey Kispert. So what Washington did is, technically they traded for Middleton, but he didn't really play much for them. Neither did Malcolm Brogdon, and they moved on from Kuzma. And again, Poole's the type of vet you want on your team if you're trying to lose, because he doesn't necessarily play winning basketball when he's the main cog. So they essentially played all young guys and Jordan Poole. So is there a world where the Jazz jettison Lowry and maybe even Walker and Collins and Sexton or whoever they can, and they add the 2 first-rounders this year and maybe even the 2 second-rounders to the group of young players, and we see something like, I don't know, John Collins playing the role of Jordan Poole surrounded by a bunch of kids? And then they do go try and play hard, but they're not good enough, and they win 20 games again. Is that a scenario you could see?
Yeah, I think that's the most likely scenario. I would just also say that Washington team tanked. Like, you pointed out, they didn't play Chris Middleton at the end of the year. Like, they didn't play Marcus Smart very much. They were making decisions in the fourth quarter of games that meant that they were trying to lose them, right? Like, I watched the Wizards because I cared about whether or not the Jazz got the first or second seed in the NBA draft standings. Like, they were trying to lose games. Now, look, they probably would have finished bottom 8 kind of regardless, right? Like, they probably end up in that bottom 5 spot. But if you want to actually compete in the tank race to be a bottom 8 team, I do think you have to tank even to like that Wizards degree of sitting in Middleton, for example. So look, I think that is probably the most likely outcome for the Jazz this year, which is not going to be super fun basketball, but at least will feel a little bit less gross.
Opening night, which vets on the roster now are on the roster then?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. They're going to try to trade all of them,
including Lowry.
I think so.
Yep.
I mean, look, you at least have to have the conversation. If you bring Lowry in with the, and I don't think Walker Kessler is a vet yet. So if you bring Lowry and Walker into the season, and I think that's like a 25-win team, and I think that is, again, really close to that 8th spot where you're giving up the pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So you at least have to have the conversations. And our guy Tony Jones is on Twitter today telling everyone that Lowry has retained all of his value. So I've never been more convinced that the Jazz are going to try to trade him.
Oh dear. What would be okay? So, and I tend to agree with you. What would be the type of return you think? Well, I guess I'll say Austin now. What sort of return does an Austin Ainge look for while shopping Lowry Markkanen? Is it straight? I mean, there are rules here, and the Jazz don't have cap space. They can't just absorb contracts, so you do have to match money. Unless John Collins shocks us all and walks away from the player option, then we have a different conversation. But when you get there, and if you get a release, if we all get a release, like, hey, the Jazz have traded Larry Markkinen, what type of return do you think Austin's looking for?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking for salary release. You're hoping for a interesting young player, and then you're hoping for a pick or two. I mean, I think last year that was essentially the Warriors trade, right? Like, was a couple of first-round picks, and Jonathan Kuminga was kind of the hope. And, you know, you're kind of hoping for that same thing as last year. I made fun of Tony in the last answer. Like, I do think you can get something semi-similar to what you were offered. I just think that it can come from fewer teams. It's tricky because, you know, the Warriors, I think you can worry about them in the long term, but they also have so much money that they can kind of play it like the Lakers a little bit and just kind of stay in that 7th to 10th spot for a while. So you don't love getting their picks, but it's hard to know. You know, I don't know that there's a team that you're really excited on betting on their picks that are going to be trading for Lowry either. So I do anticipate a ton of player movement this year, and I think just like being part of a 3 or 4 team trade could be the outcome here. And that's, you know, where like a guy like Justin Zanuck is actually really useful because he does have those connections around the league. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how that plays out, but that's my guess is like some salary relief, pick or two, and an interesting young player.
All right, we're going to revisit it every week until the draft. Luckily, it's only a couple of weeks, but before I set you loose, the current Andy Larson opinion of best case scenario at 5 for the Jazz is who and why?
Probably VJ Edgecombe right now, and I don't know. I think it's unlikely that he falls to 5, but if he does, I think that's probably best case because I like his tools. I like his production as a freshman. His stats are actually better than I think he's given credit for. I thought he measured out well at the combine, and I think he's the kind of tough-minded defensive type that Austin Ainge said that he was interested in, right? Like, I think that you can question that with other guys at the top of this draft. Ace Bailey, I'm just going to say the name, and I don't think you have to worry about that very much with VJ Edgecombe.
We don't have time to talk about RSL, and honestly, I don't want to, Andy, so I'm going to set you loose on a Wednesday, and we'll chat soon, bud, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
All right, we'll welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call at 801-424-DISH. It's 801-424-DISH. Save a grip of money on a bunch of different things. What's going on, Ryan?
Great opportunities right now. Dish just sent out about almost 100,000 gift card offers. So if you didn't see one in the mail, check again. If you're really interested in getting a big fat gift card, it's about $500. Call us and we can check to see if it was mailed to you. We can hook you up with that. Or you can take the promotion where you get 3 months free service. That's worth about $400 if you take the higher package. Plus, you get the 2-year promotion. The price is guaranteed not to change for 2 years. And we'll throw in dinner at JCW's. Have you installed for free as early as next day. Call us up. This is the best way to save money on your TV. Plus, you get the best TV option out there, the biggest, fastest DVR in the marketplace, best price guarantee with us, and we'll have you installed as early as next day. Call us now, 424-DISH. It's 801-424-DISH.
Eric Weddle, the Ute legend himself, stops by coming up after a short break during the 4 o'clock hour of the program, so keep it right here on ESPN 700. Get to the 5 o'clock hour of the program tonight and get you ready for Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals with Edmonton and Florida, rematch of last year's Stanley Cup matchup that went 7 games. Neil Smith will roll by. Good stuff from Josh Furlong and Andy Larson so far today. But let's bring in our guy, Ute legend and future Hall of Famer Eric Weddle on a Wednesday afternoon. Ewed, happy Wednesday, man. How you doing?
Doing amazing. Thanks for having me on. We can't say future Hall of Famer yet because we don't know. You know, voting can get crazy. So we'll say maybe soon to be Hall of Famer would have a nice ring to it.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. I am optimistic, Ewed, but I am not you. So I will ask you, where were you when you found out this news? And what was your reaction? Because I always find it interesting talking to people like you that have achieved something like this. And, you know, you hear a lot of musicians or athletes or people that have achieved say things like, my dreams never got there. Like, I never really dreamed to be a Hall of Famer. Was this a goal of yours, or is this one of those things like a potential accomplishment that you didn't even allow your mind to get to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're playing a team sport. I don't think anyone goes in thinking they want to end up a Hall of Famer. It's just kind of, you know, I could be wrong. Maybe it's like Deion Sanders might have thought that because he was just that incredibly talented and knew that of himself early on. But for myself, it was just, man, living it up and having an opportunity to play college ball is where few and far between get that. So I was trying to make the most every day. And then, you know, those things kind of fall into place when you're around good people, great coaches, great university, great teammates. Like it never happens by yourself, especially in football. So if something like this ever does happen for me, it's definitely a group effort.
Where were you when you heard the news, and what was your reaction, Ewed?
Well, Mark Harlan actually reached out to me, shot me a text. He's like, "Oh, this is great, first step in getting you into the College Football Hall of Fame." And I didn't know what he was talking about. So I was doing some other things, and I hadn't responded back because I didn't know if it was meant for me or someone else because I didn't have, like, there was no news at the time. And then, of course, the post started coming out in the news stating that I was a finalist for it. So I was just out at the high school with the football team. We just finished up spring ball. So just coaching these kids up and got the news. And, you know, it's humbling, obviously. It's exciting. And, again, it's not ever done. No success on the football field happens because of the individual. It's always about the team. So I just think about my teammates and think about the team. And I think about the love of Utah that I have in that university, and just thankful that I ended up at the place that I was meant to be at.
Have you allowed yourself to think about what that phone call would be like if you hear that you have indeed been inducted? Have you allowed your mind to go there?
Nah, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think too far ahead, and I'm a guy that hopes for the best but prepared for the worst. So I don't let myself get too far down that road because it's not my mentality. When it happens, it'll be fresh and it'll be new, and I'll enjoy it if it happens, and if not, then I'll just go about my day like I always do.
That's a great attitude, but I will follow up with, what would it mean to you if you do get that call and the news is you're in, man? What would that mean to you?
Well, you know, it means you're an all-time great. You left a lasting impression on the field and off of very few do. And I think the number's around 1,300 college football Hall of Famers. So to be in that mix and to be said and looked at as a Hall of Famer is a very, very unique and humbling proposition. So it's to really wrap your head around it is kind of hard to do, because I don't, you know, people know me. I don't look at myself in that instance. I think I put it all out there. And I think in the college, I said this a couple days ago, I think the College Football Hall of Fame, I could sit there and say, yeah, I think I was one of the best in that sense where I could be labeled as a Hall of Fame now. The NFL is a whole different animal, which I don't think, in my opinion. But the college football, like I could sit there and say, yeah, I belong with one of the best in those names that are enshrined. So it would be incredible and humbling and truly, I would probably be lost for words if I'm being honest.
Okay, I'm glad you said what you just said because I was going to follow up with this. Like, you do know that you are an all-time great, right? Like, you're aware of exactly what you mean to the program around here, correct?
Well, I mean, yeah, I know appreciated and I'm loved, and you know that place is a very special place in my heart. So it's I know. Now there were so many great players. So where do you rank them? I kind of in the old adage of Jordan of, you know, rank me where you rank them, but you can't put me ahead of people that played 20 years before me, 30, 40, 50 years. Like, I respect the game way too much. But I do know I'm loved and appreciated. I know that around the university.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Because I mean, I appreciate the attitude. I respect the endeavor. But as a player, you were a killer. You were. So I wonder how you balance out being such a killer on the field while maintaining more of a balanced approach just as a human.
Well, I mean, that you cross that white line at any point in my career, whether I was a true freshman at the University of Utah or 14th year coming off the street, 2 years retired, my goal and mindset was I'm here to annihilate my opposition. I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here when it's that my job is on the line. Yes, when I get off the white line, I'm a great teammate and I love my teammates and this and that. But I have a job to do, and it's every rep is a chance to prove that I belong on this field leading this team. So it's a very easy switch to turn on and off that I learned to do over the course of my college years and then in the NFL. But it's a dog-eat-dog world, and if you don't have that mindset, you will get eaten up and spit out. And so I'd rather be on the other side of eating than getting spit out.
I wanted to ask you this today because I come from a family, Eric, where I am the oldest of six, and I am the only one of the six that went to the University of Utah. The other five all went to BYU, and they all married.
Oh, wow.
They all married spouses they met at BYU, and they all.
You are outnumbered, my friend.
Oh, I am. I chose truth. Ewed is how I like to put it. Obviously, I like to rib them, and I mean, look, it's all love. It's all good. And a lot of the coaches down there, and all of my brothers that went to BYU, they always say you're the Ute that they wish was a Cougar, and you're the Ute that they just cannot say anything negative about. Does that jive with your experience? Does it feel like you have that universal respect from both these fan bases up here?
Well, I think it's to hear that is really, it makes me smile. It makes me, I don't like to say it like have moments where you're proud of yourself, but I truly am proud of how I try to represent myself and my family and my name, my last name. And even more so in the grand scheme of things, we're all here for a purpose, and we can get all riled up. But at the end of the day, it's about respecting your opponent no matter what, and speaking and treating your opponent in that type of fashion. I want to be treated as how others treat me. And so to hear that, I do smile, and I am proud of that because I tried to represent myself in a way that most people will be proud to have me on their team, regardless of the rivalry. And shoot, I am so close with coaches on both sides, even at BYU. Talk to those guys probably just as much. And those men that are in those leadership roles, mentoring roles, I tip my hat to all of them, especially the ones that I love and care for, because they are men that I look up to and that are changing the trajectory of these young men. And so both programs have great men that are lead them and women that are within the facility and doing all the great things. Like, they're really top-notch programs that I'm awesome to be affiliated with through friendships and family.
I wonder if you feel comfortable because the relationships you have with your former coaches and teammates, that's, that's a sacred space. And I have been close enough and in locker rooms and around teams that I respect that space. But I wonder if you'd feel comfortable sharing whether or not you heard from Morgan or Coach Witt or Kalani when the news came down that you're on the Hall of Fame ballot. What other phone calls did you receive, Ewed?
Yeah, Coach Witt, of course, reached out and congratulated me, and on both sides, anyone that knows me or is close with me reached out, and but they also know me as well that it's not a done deal, so they'll probably want to save the congratulations to when it's final said and done. So they know me as well that I'm probably not missing a beat until it becomes final.
Tell me how the coaching stuff is going. Last time we talked to you, you kind of outlined the early returns of this new endeavor of yours, and I wonder if any of these young men who you are coaching have any idea what sort of killer you really were as a player.
I think the younger generation, each year that goes by, could care less about who their head coach is and what he used to be. And sometimes I have to remind them in a positive way that I'm here to help them and guide them and take it for what it's worth. Some of them it goes one ear out the other, but the few that actually take it and will be better from it, then those are the ones that you're really going to impact. You can't impact them all. You try to, but the few that want it on and off the field and try to build these young men into future fathers and husbands of the future, that's really the ultimate goal. And these kids nowadays, they got so much going on that football and or the history of who their coach may be is way down the list of prioritizing things.
Your boy is Gage, correct? That's your son?
Yes, sir.
You still have him in the program, and if so, how's that going?
Yeah, he's going to be a sophomore coming up.
Oh, he's only a soph. Okay.
Yeah, he's a fun kid to be around. His passion, his work ethic, how he leads. He's got a chance to be special, and I'm just along for the ride and trying to help guide him as best I can, and excited for this year to lead our team. And he's put in the work on and off the field and really put his best foot forward to have a great year on offense and defense. So we got a good group coming back in a connected unit. Got to stay healthy, obviously, but we have a chance to be really good, and we'll see where his journey takes him over the next few years.
He play like his dad at all?
He's better than me.
Oh, wow.
When I was at this point in high school. So he's a bigger, probably more physical version of myself. You know, he's 6'2", he's 185 pounds now and getting big and strong. So he's I can only hope and dream that he'll have a better high school, college, and if he could ever make it, better career than I ever did.
What sort of, it's such a delicate balance. I mean, what sort of advice do you give him? What sort of, because I'm a parent too, and you really learn as they grow. The best thing you can do is be guardrails, and it's like bumper lanes in bowling, and they're the ball. You're there to make sure they kind of stay in the lane, but you can't roll the ball down the middle for them. So what's it been like to watch this young man grow and evolve as a player, and how do you balance that as somebody that played and won at the highest of levels when it comes to the advice you dispense to him?
Well, I just try to remind them that no matter what, if you don't have fun and you don't love the game and everything that it entails, then what's the point? The game is beautiful when it at its purest form. So trying to remind him that, and I think he does a good job of that. But he just he wants to be so good, and I think he puts a lot of pressure on himself that reminding him that it's about managing the mishaps, the negative plays, and how you rebound from that, and how you control your emotions from a play-to-play basis is something that I think he's going to grow to be able to handle and really make that a strength. But last year was a delicate situation being a freshman and being the head coach, but I'm not going to be apologetic for one of my best players, and it just so happens to be my son. Like, I'm not going to sit here and not give him positive feedback or be excited when he makes a great play on the field or do this and that because of the optics. I'm not doing that anymore. So I'm going to be proud, and I only get to coach him 3 more years, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it because I'm not doing this for anything other than trying to get back to the kids. And he just happens to be one of our better players that does everything right. I shouldn't have to apologize for that.
No, you shouldn't ever. You should never. You should revel in it. You should be proud of it.
Yeah.
You should enjoy the entire situation. I've got his socials up, and I see as a freshman he was your starting quarterback and also a starting safety. And he has schools calling already, right? Looks like he's got some offers in his back pocket already, even only as a freshman.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of came at a whirlwind. You know, the recruiting starts way early nowadays, especially if you're a freshman playing on varsity and you play well. Schools are going to find you, and they're gonna start getting their feelers out and let you know that you're on their radar. So he's got a long ways to go, and he understands that these offers are basically saying, like, we're interested in you. And if you keep developing and keep getting better and improving over the next couple of years, then this could be a reality. But oftentimes the attention comes with these young kids. They go the other way, and they don't stay humble, and they don't stay hungry, and they become entitled, and they feel like they've arrived when that's not reality. You have a bullseye in your back, even more so for him, for who his dad is, that he's got to outwork and outplay everyone every day. You can't ever let up, because that'll be the opportunity that someone comes and takes your job or takes your playing time and or takes that scholarship. So he has a good sense of that, and he appreciates the love per se, but he knows he has a long ways to go to make it a reality.
I noticed earlier, Ewed, you recently turned 40, so welcome to our club. I am a little more advanced than you are, but I'm still in the 40s area, so welcome to the 40s. And it's been a minute since you went through the recruiting stuff. I wonder what the main differences are that you've noticed, because college football is much different now than it was in 2001, 2002 when you were being recruited. What are the main differences between what you see Gage and his teammates going through and what you went through back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I could probably spend an hour talking about the differences and trying to navigate the landscape of recruiting now. I mean, I took my official visit to the University of Utah in December and ended up committing that week, a month before signing day, where now a lot of times these players, depending on positions, depending on need, et cetera, can be committed sophomore, junior season. So it's definitely changed. And with the NIL, the programs that emphasize culture and loyalty and being a part of the community and the university is much more appealing to me, because I'm a little old school, but some schools aren't that way. So it's hey, we need you, we want you, how much can I pay you? Where in the grand scheme of things, this is a huge decision on not only what happens on the field, but the relationships and connections you make off the field and how you represent yourself. And it goes both ways, right? Like after a year, the school may tell you that you're never going to play, so you want to hit the portal, and then other cases that you want more money and this and that. So it's just so many different dynamics. I just try to remind all my kids, engage when it gets to that point, is just the connection and where do you see yourself for 4 years, right? Like, where do you want to build the relationships and build a legacy on this endeavor, right? Like, it's not about the money. It's not about where I can get this or that. Obviously, it's about the X's and O's and systems and offense and defense and the staff and who's going to be coaching me and the culture and this and that, blah, blah, blah. But outside of that, it's what do you want? What is your lasting impression on you? Like, what do you want to be represented by? And what do you want to be remembered by? You want to be remembered by chasing the next best thing, or staying where your feet are and growing and dealing with adversity and dealing with competition and maybe falling down? Are you going to get back up, or are you going to run to the next best thing? So those are the things that I try to look at and try to educate our kids. And it's not me, though. It's Gage's decision and his journey. I'm just trying to help him. At the end of the day, it's going to be him and what he wants. But I know deep down that whatever decision, if it comes to that, if he's fortunate enough to have a decision, that he'll do it for the right reasons.
I'm quite sure that our Ute fans listening, after they heard you say Gage is a bigger, stronger version of me, are waiting for me to ask you, if that's the case, is there any chance this young man plays his college ball in Salt Lake City? And if so, what would that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, he's a big thinker in the sense that he wants to be better than I was, and he wants to make his own mark. Now, he obviously has a deep love for Utah, but I would be happy if he gets to play college football. I'm not really pigeonholed on where. I'm more just would be so proud if he even gets a chance, because it's tough, man. There's amazing players across the board that do things the right way, and sometimes it just is luck. Sometimes it's staying injury-free. Sometimes it's just seeing a coach that believes in you. Like, there's so many different factors. So, yes, I would be honored and proud if he went to the U, but he's going to carve out his own journey, and obviously he will, when he gets to that, if he has choices. But there's a lot of great schools out there that have showed that they like him, and if he continues on the trajectory, that he'll have his choice, which is pretty insane to even think about.
I think it's awesome. I think it's great. As a father of a son, I know what that must feel like for you. Before I set you loose, Ewed, we all know that year one in the Big 12 was not what we were hoping for or any of us expected at all. Some new coaches, some new transfers. What's your confidence level that Utah football year two in the Big 12 will look better than it did year one?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough that Coach Witt and Scally and even Coach Ludd, before he left, allowed myself and some coaches to come out for 2-3 days at a time, be in all the meetings, position meetings, coaches meetings, obviously be at the practices. So I'm pretty intimate with what's going on and seeing the guys, and I'm optimistic, ecstatic, excited for the team. I think it's a more connected unit. I believe with the change offensively, change is good if you're willing, and obviously we need to stay healthy. We know that, but the groundwork is there, and I think the changes offensively are going to bring a fresh new start, a fresh new vibe and energy and belief. I think with our offensive line, with those tackles and the guards and just the whole unit is going to be the best in the country, potentially 2 first-round picks on the edges, tackle-wise. So, I mean, we got a lot of great things that are coming out for this season that, yes, our last year was not us, but hey, that stuff happens, right? And how are we going to rebound? How are we going to come back from that with Coach Witt leading the charge and Scally on defense, and with the new offense, I'm drawing a blank of the offense coordinator, which I'll have to apologize for.
Jason Beck.
Yes, Coach Beck, who was obviously gracious enough to let me be in the meetings and whatnot and learn from them. And I think we could be an outstanding team, and as long as we can, it just comes back to team football, right? Protect the football, be explosive on offense. I think that's going to happen naturally with the quarterback, with the element of running, but also extending plays. But just making sure that no matter what, we protect the football, we score in the red zone, and we play great defense, which we will. We were going to be better than we were last year on defense with Scally and the system and the guys playing together and being healthy. So, listen, nobody on the schedule worries me and/or tells me we can't beat if we go play great football. Is there great teams on our schedule? Yes, but we go play our style of football, we should be able to beat anyone on there.
All right, my guy. Well, thrilled for you, and we are optimistic about your chances. And when that goes down, we'd love to get you back on, if not sooner. So enjoy the rest of the week, Eric. Thanks for the time, buddy. Be well, okay?
You got it anytime. Thanks for having me on, brother.
All right, Eric Weddle, future Hall of Famer, not just in college. I didn't offer the follow-up when he said, I'm not sure that the NFL thing is a possibility. I felt like he was getting uncomfortable with my effusive praise, but he's got a shot at some point to be in Canton as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, Eric's a guy that, despite how good he was here at Utah, and despite having a Super Bowl ring, all of the above, doesn't like to toot his horn too much. A stat for you, Spence: 5 guys in NFL history, 900 tackles and 29 career interceptions. It's Eric Weddle, Brian Dawkins, Rodney Harrison, Rondé Barber, and Charles Woodson. That's the entire list.
Jeez. That's impressive. Yeah, at some point our guy's going to get a look. If I was a Hall of Famer, I'd never take the jacket off. Let's be clear. I'm wearing the gold jacket all day, every day.
Oh, if I reach the pinnacle of any sport of any kind, the ring, the jacket, the green jacket, the gold jacket, Super Bowl ring, it's on me forever at that point.
Or being the best dish provider in the nation. Speaking of Hall of Famers, Ryan from the Dish Pros, 801-424-DISH. Save money on a bunch of things. What's going on, Ryan?
Definitely, and we're right there at the top of not a Hall of Famer, but we are Retailer of the Year multiple years in a row. And guys, we've been just taking care of everybody, and the deals are really actually amazing right now. Dish sent out about almost 100,000 mailers in the northern Utah area, where there's actually a $500 gift card attached to them. Now, there's a good chance you might have missed it, but if you're thinking, gosh, if I get $500 off and I get set up on this great 2-year deal, I'm in. Call us up. We can check and see if it got sent to you, and if it did, we can attach the gift card offer. If not, worst case scenario, you get 3 months free, which, if you take the higher package, is about $400. So call us up and take advantage of this and get set up with the biggest DVR out there, Auto Hops commercials. Guys, packages, if you an America's Top 120 package, it's like $90-$80, right around there. We get you also dinner at JCW's, throw on the movie channels. The price is guaranteed not to change. Plus, ask about our internet offers right now. Half a dozen, literally. You name it, I got it. I can get you internet. So I can tell you what you should be paying and what you can be paying. And we're talking $35 to $55 a month. If you're spending a grundle more than that, even if you have fiber, there's a good possibility, because fiber is deregulated in a lot of areas, you can just pay your bill to another company, use the same fiber, and just spend $30-$40 less per month. That easy. Call us, 424-DISH. Call now, take advantage of this, get the best price guarantee, and ask about the internet too. 424-DISH, 801-424-3474.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. We'll get you ready for tonight's Stanley Cup Finals between Edmonton and Florida with Neil Smith. We'll do a little NBA playoffs before we sign off at 6. On a Wednesday edition of The Drive, you're halfway through that work week. You are one day closer to the weekend. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, let's get a Drive at 5 time on a Wednesday afternoon. It is a beautiful day outside, about 72 degrees, clear and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah, right outside of our Broadway media studios. And as it is every day, it's good to have you guys along for the ride. Spence Checketts beyond the mic, Porter Larson producing the program today. We are about 50 minutes away from dropping the puck. Edmonton and Florida. Battle for Lord Stanley's Cup, a rematch of last year's Stanley Cup final that went 7 games, with Florida winning the first 3, Edmonton winning the next 3, and Florida grabbing the Stanley Cup with a win in Game 7, 2-1. So it is a rematch, which doesn't happen often. This is a grueling tournament. So the action starts tonight. Should be a fun one. I want to remind you, we are your home of the Stanley Cup finals here in our market. So stay tuned. After we say goodnight at 6 o'clock, we will send you to the coverage of Panthers-Oilers Game 1. The Oilers are a slight favorite in the series. We're going to bring in Neil Smith, who was the general manager of the Rangers, general manager of the Islanders, won a Stanley Cup, high-level scout for the Detroit Red Wings, to preview the game tonight. Tomorrow, it's time for the NBA to be back front and center, as the NBA Finals will begin tomorrow at 6:30 Mountain Time. And we will bring you that as well. We're your home of the NBA Finals here in the market, in addition to the Stanley Cup Finals. So stay tuned. It was Media Day today for the NBA Finals. We heard from both players and coaches for Oklahoma City and Indiana. We're a few weeks away from the NBA Draft, where the Utah Jazz have some decisions to make. It's a massive offseason for the Utah Jazz that's already started with some news of Austin Ainge taking over as the president of basketball operations and the main basketball decision maker in the front office now. A front office that includes his dad, Danny Ainge, as the CEO, and Justin Zanuck as the general manager. Also, several other members of that staff that we probably should give a lot more credit to. But those are the main voices driving an offseason that will color and crystallize what next season will look like, whether they want to tank or not. As we've been talking about, there's that draft pick they have that they cannot lose. They just cannot lose it. It would be a massive step in the wrong direction. Barring something completely unforeseen, like a summer where Cody Williams comes back and looks completely different, or Taylor Hendricks gets healthy and shocks us all with his development, Keontae, Isaiah, Filipowski, I could keep going. It's a big offseason for the Utah Jazz. There's no doubt about that. All right, 5 o'clock hour of the program today on a Wednesday is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Window Products. You can get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. Local Salt Lake company. You guys have probably heard me interview Nate Orchard, Jake Weber. We've done remotes at their place, and they're here to take care of you as a resident of Salt Lake and the surrounding areas. So as the weather starts to incrementally get warmer, here's breaking news. Your house is probably going to get warmer. Which means you might want to look at replacing your windows. If you have old windows, your house gets hot. So what do? You turn the AC on, you jack it up, and you spend a bunch of money on your power bill. And there's a great deal going on right now at Advanced Window Products where you save $2,500 when you buy 10 windows or more. Everyone knows Nate, mayor of Sac Lake City, played in the NFL for 8 years, and he is just as good of a dude as he was as a football player. And this is a solid company. Now, the nice thing about this offer is that if you're not in the market now to get new windows, maybe you're going to wait till the fall to sell a home. If you get on their schedule, you lock in the savings. So whether you need to replace your windows soon or maybe in a couple of months, call Advanced Window Products today at 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or visit advancedwindows.com. Started things off today with Josh Furlong, who covers the University of Utah for our friends at KSL. Some good stuff from Josh, some off-season college football storylines. Still kind of awaiting word. The House v. NCAA settlement does not appear to be on the horizon. We're 27 days away from the date where Division I programs will start distributing over $1 billion to their athletes. Right now, there are no rules. There are no guidelines. There's no ability to enforce anything. And until the House v. NCAA settlement kind of lands and we can learn more about it, this is still a situation where there's a tremendous amount of ambiguity surrounding the world of college athletics and college football specifically. Big 12 meetings last week in Orlando brought about some clarity about endeavors with this conference, but certainly whatever the Big 12 wants to do, it will be in lockstep with their other 3 peers in the P4 stratosphere. And no new news. We talked a little bit earlier today with Josh about the situation at BYU with Jake Retzlaff. I hesitate to even make that a football story, but he is the starting quarterback of BYU, and we are a sports talk radio show. And no new news has emerged over the past couple of weeks. I know Brian Santiago, the new athletic director at BYU, gave some public statements at the Big 12 media stuff with our friends at KSL, where they're just waiting for the legal process to play out. No criminal charges have been filed. We talked to our friends at Handy and Handy about that as to what that process would look like. And I believe either Preston or Garrett talked about the potential of criminal charges being filed. And if they would, it would have happened quickly, if I remember correctly, with our legal experts. So kind of waiting word on that. RSL is in the midst of a break. They only have 2 games this month. Their next game will be on the 14th of June against DC, and their ability to add talent will not manifest itself until next month when the summer window opens. The Phoenix Suns have hired Jordan Ott as their new head coach. Jordan spent last year on the bench next to Kenny Atkinson and former Ute Johnny Bryant with the Cleveland Cavaliers. A lot of people are drawing a straight line between Johnny Bryant and the New York Knicks, where he was an associate head coach before moving over to Cleveland. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, New York fired Tom Thibodeau earlier this week, and a piece of news that caught a lot of people off guard. No word on exactly who the candidates are. Names like Jay Wright and Jeff Van Gundy, and as I referenced, Johnny Bryant are out there. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But pumped for the NBA Finals. Get some basketball back tomorrow. But tonight is time. All right, wrapping it up, final segment of the program for this Wednesday afternoon. I am just seeing this. I guess it was announced a little bit earlier. The Salt Lake City Police Department has charged a University of Utah tennis player with rape. According to a probable cause statement filed today, 21-year-old Burke Bugaric, no clue. I've never heard of this person. That is a unique spelling of a last name. He's facing 3 counts of rape, 2 counts of forcible sodomy, and 1 count of object rape. The alleged assault took place November 16th of last year. The victim in the case told police that she and Bugaric, that's how I'm going to roll with, were at a bar with a group of friends. They went to his house. She did not want to do the things that he initiated. He has been suspended, was suspended. So here's a statement from the athletic department at the U. Quote, "We are aware of the criminal charges filed against a men's tennis student athlete upon initially learning in November of 2024 of an accusation against the student athlete. The athletics department immediately suspended the student athlete. In January of 2025, when no charges had been filed against the student athlete, the suspension was lifted with the condition that it would be reapplied should the charges be filed in the case. We treat allegations of significant misconduct very seriously, and the student athlete has been suspended." So there you go. That, I guess, was something that was public knowledge earlier, but I'm just seeing it as we're wrapping up the program. All right, we got a little Stanley Cup playoffs coming your way with Edmonton and Florida, a rematch of last year's series. If you are new to the sport of hockey, let me encourage you to watch, listen, consume. I think it's the best playoffs format that we have. The intensity is something that simply just is unmatched. And I'm hoping for a long series, and I'm hoping for some Game 7s because we didn't get many at all. In fact, 0 in the conference finals of pro basketball and pro hockey. Would you trade Karl Anthony Towns for Kevin Durant?
In 2025, 2026, no. Almost any other situation, if you would have asked me like last year or the year before or the year before or the year before, the year before, the year before, yes. But I love me some KD. I think he may have some good basketball left, but as Karl Anthony Towns showed, he's still a really good piece on a really good team. There are things about his game that make him prone to matchup issues sometimes, mainly on the defensive side of the ball.
He doesn't guard at all.
Yeah, it's bad. But Kevin Durant's also not let's be clear, the kind of defensive player of the year candidate he was back in Golden State either.
You know what, man? I might do that.
Really?
I might trade Cat for Durant.
Listen, if you think you have 1 year to go for it, like go for a title, go for it. I don't know that the roster the Knicks have right now, adding KD to it, you probably make a run next year, but that's it. It's over after that. At least as that core is constructed. And then you're probably dealing with a KD that maybe wants another year or two on that deal, wants to drag it out. It seems and feels like to me if Kevin Durant was with the Knicks, he'd want an extension, and then you're in a situation that's not just a 1-year rental to try to make a run.
This is shaping up to be a wild offseason in the NBA, dude.
Yes.
Wild offseason.
Yes, it is.
All right. Let's get out of here. Hockey coming up. Stanley Cup Finals coming up. Don't forget NBA Finals tomorrow. Porter, what comes our way on a Thursday edition of the show?
As you mentioned, we got some hockey coming up on the show next. We'll recap that tomorrow with our friend Belle Frazier. Talk a little Utah Mammoth offseason as well. Of course, the top 5 pick in the NHL draft and more. NBA Daily Assist with Dave McMiniman. We may double up on our NBA Daily Assist tomorrow. Still TBD on one Tim Bontemps. Hoping to chat with your guy Mad Dog Russo as well. That may happen tomorrow. That may happen Friday. Some things in the works there. We'll have Sports Court tomorrow. So a bunch of hoops. We'll mix in some soccer, some college football off-season stuff as well. So a busy Thursday show.
So join us for that. We'll say goodnight for a Wednesday show. Get out of the way for some Stanley Cup Finals hockey. Special thank you today to Josh Furlong, Andy Larson, Eric Weddle. Ute fans, if you missed the E-Wed interview, it was really fun. Definitely check that out. And, of course, the great Neil Smith. If you missed any of the sound from the show, ESPN 700sports.com is where you go. You can also download our mobile app and take us on the go. ESPN 700 app is available for free in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon, 4 hours, we have a podcast page. If you would support it, it would really, really help us out. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. So search for it. Hit that subscribe button, follow button, whatever they ask you to do. Follow along. Say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. It actually helps. Reporter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Wednesday evening. Enjoy a little Stanley Cup Finals coming up on the other side. Right here on ESPN 700, 92 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network.